I broke up with my boyfriend over laundry, and I don't regret a thing. I'm 28, and a week ago I walked out on my 29-year-old boyfriend. We'd been together for almost 2 years, and I will never go back to him. I don't owe him another chance or explanations, and I definitely don't owe anything to his family. It all blew up over something as stupid as laundry. I just need to tell someone because people around me act like I'm overreacting, but what happened was genuinely frightening. We moved in together 3 months ago. I knew he was planning to propose soon. I work in a corporate field, he works in retail. Our relationship was pretty normal. Weekend trips, vacations, meeting each other's families, just an ordinary, calm love story. We were crazy about each other. And then, last week, I was sitting on the bed folding clean clothes. I also folded a few things that were in the basket. It had never been an issue before. We share house chores pretty equally. Neither of us is obsessed with cleaning. He walked in looking irritated and said in this tense voice that the way I folded his clothes was ridiculous and messy. I froze. We always talk things out calmly, and this wasn't like him at all. I apologized, said I didn't know he had a specific system, and told him that if he prefers his way, he can fold his own clothes, easy. And that's where everything snapped. He turned into someone else. Why would I fold something you're supposed to fold, he snapped. You're just too lazy to learn how to do things properly. It sounded almost unhinged. First angry, then mocking, then he let out this weird laugh, like the whole situation was proof I was absurd. I felt scared. He grabbed a t-shirt and started explaining his folding technique in this cold, performative voice. There, perfect, now do it. And he tossed the shirt into my lap. Go on, it's not hard. I just sat there and asked, are you okay? He barked back, you think I'm losing it over a t-shirt? It's just a shirt, who even cares? But his eyes, his face, it wasn't him. I stood up and he said, so when we have kids, you're not going to fold their clothes either? You won't make sure they look tidy and have self-respect? I think that's very important. I said, well, I think it's important too, but I hate folding laundry, so maybe you could fold their stuff? His face went red. He started pulling my clothes out of the basket, folding them aggressively, muttering at the wall. Fine, I'll fold everything. Maybe then you'll grow some damn self-respect. You have so many nice things and you can't even fold them. Unreal. And the worst part, you don't want to learn. Just stay away from the laundry. This is my job now. Imagine your kids opening a drawer and seeing a total mess. That's what their life will be, thanks to you. I was terrified. 30 minutes earlier, he was completely normal. I started thinking he was having some kind of psychotic break. I told him it was too much. He said, yeah, I get it. My obsession with laundry. My obsession with self-respect. I went to the bathroom because I felt sick. Then he heard me in the hallway. He pulled out the laundry basket and threw it onto the floor. He had never thrown anything before. When he walked back into the bedroom, I quietly slipped out of the bathroom, grabbed my bag, left the apartment, got in the car, and drove straight to my parents'. My brain was screaming, danger, danger, get out. It didn't feel like a fight. It felt like an emergency. An hour later, I was at my parents' house. They live an hour away. They were terrified when they saw me. When I told them what happened, my mom said, it's strange, but couples do fight when they first move in together. Maybe it's just stress. My dad, who's very eccentric, said, well, at least you didn't get murdered by a serial killer. Then turned to my mom, if that psycho calls, tell her she moved to Mozambique. I'm not kidding. My mom looked worried and asked, are you sure you're safe? Did he hurt you? Should we call his mother? Check if he's okay? My dad said, don't call his mother. Call the police for a wellness check if you want, but don't give them details. He told us to lock the doors, then called someone and had my car moved into a neighbor's garage for the night. My mom shook her head and said, I really don't think it's that serious. My dad finally shrugged and said, "All right, so maybe it wasn't that serious. I just moved her car. There's no space here anyway." That's exactly who he is. Chaotic, but helpful. And my mom worries in her own way. I pulled myself together and called my boyfriend. He picked up immediately. "Where did you go? It was just a stupid laundry argument. I'm over it. You just looked so scared." Then he laughed and added, "Guess you finally met my neurotic alter ego." I told him straight up that he terrified me, that I had no idea he was capable of reacting like that. And then he suddenly switched into panic mode. He kept asking who I told, saying he was working on it, that he was embarrassed, that it was personal. I understand mental health can be complicated. I really do. I even tried saying that if he had told me earlier, we could have built some kind of strategy. It wouldn't have blindsided me like that. He started crying, saying, I know, damn it, I know, but I love you, and I'm so ashamed." And my brain just screamed, "No, stop. This is wrong." Before I even fully realized it, I told him I didn't want to be with you anymore, that you scared me, that there was no coming back from that moment. He spent 10 minutes begging, "Come back, please. We'll go to therapy tomorrow. I'll take you to my therapist. We'll fix this." But when I didn't agree to anything, he flipped again, back to that awful cold tone. "Fine. Screw you then. You couldn't handle it. This is your fault. My family will never speak to you again. My sisters won't. My friends won't. No one will believe you left me over a t-shirt. Ridiculous." I hung up. I emailed the landlord and said I was moving out and needed someone present when I came for my things. I said they could leave the keys for him afterwards. I emailed work to take some time off. Turned off my phone. I was shaking, nauseous, but there was this weird sense of relief, too. The next morning, I woke up to 74 missed calls. My voicemail was full. He had sent so many messages they wouldn't even load, some delusional, some weirdly affectionate, some threatening, some mocking. Stuff like, "You know I'll win you back. I'll be everywhere you are. You won't resist. What is happening to us?" It was terrifying. My dad went with me to the apartment. The building staff told us he had reported that he kicked me out and that I wasn't allowed to return and that he would deliver my belongings himself. That's when I called the non-emergency police line. Officers came, I showed them my ID, photos, messages. They made the building let me in. One cop waited by the car while the other came upstairs with us. I grabbed essentials, clothes, documents, books. I didn't even want to touch anything big. I just wanted out. As we packed, the cop suddenly motioned for us to quiet down. He tapped his ear and then silently mouthed, "Cameras." My dad instantly whispered, "Doesn't matter. Nothing is worth staying here. Let's go." We hauled everything downstairs. The officers pulled up near the lot, gave us their cards, and asked if I wanted to file anything officially. I told them we argued and he just snapped. I got scared. They said, "That's not a crime, but it does sound like a mental health situation. We understand why you left. If he threatens you, call us immediately." Later, the officer who'd been upstairs apologized for rushing us, saying he spotted cameras in the smoke detectors and couldn't know whether they were recording in real time. I hadn't known about any cameras. It never even crossed my mind. Why didn't my boyfriend, the person I lived with for almost 2 years, tell me? Who exactly had I been living with? A week has passed. I got a new phone and number because he kept messaging me from random accounts. My dad thinks he might have installed something on my old one. I feel like I'm in hiding. I work remotely. I'm scared to go outside. I order groceries to my parents' house. My closest friends are horrified, but other people keep saying, "That's hard to believe. Maybe you're not telling the whole story. Everyone has cameras these days. Just move on." His mother even called my mom, saying he was devastated and couldn't believe everything ended over laundry. Mom told her a bit of what happened, and his mom just said, "He must be so stressed. You know how these things are." His mom has always been funny, smart, kind, but now I'm paranoid. What did she know? Did she know anything at all? Mom said she told him he genuinely scared me and that the lies about kicking me out and the hidden cameras were deeply disturbing. His mom paused and then said she had to go and told my mom, "Tell her it isn't her fault. I'm just very sorry. I knew he was getting help, but these things don't vanish overnight. I'll handle him." Now I feel like I'm watching my own life from the outside.
I'm writing to the friend who ended my marriage. You're probably wondering why I suddenly left all our group chats, why you can't find me on social media anymore, why, despite your upcoming birthday, Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, you haven't heard a single word from me. My husband is in love with you. You and he destroyed my life. I've loved you since we were kids. I barely remember a time when you weren't in my life. We're 30 now, and your insecurity somehow became more important to you than our friendship. You're one of the most beautiful women I know. We tell you that every time we see you. Even when you showed up in those revealing outfits around my husband during casual hangouts, I still told you that you looked great. Even when it annoyed me how you'd suddenly act drunk after 5 shots, while I need 20 watered-down ones just to feel anything, and then start stripping in front of him, I still tucked you into bed and tried to take care of you. My husband admitted that he feels drawn to your energy, that he can't get you out of his head, and that for the past 2 years, he's been falling in love with you. With you! The last time you were at our place for Thanksgiving, he and you locked eyes across the table, just for a second, and then you started sucking on that chip like you were doing something obscene. Everyone noticed. Everyone wondered what the hell you were doing. As the night went on and people kept drinking, everyone except me, because I wanted to stay sober, I saw the way he stared at you when you danced. I saw how uncomfortable he got when you told your stupid blind date story. Then you started talking about your breasts right in front of him. You shook your butt in his direction when he walked past you, to a song that wasn't even meant for that. After that night, things at home were awful. I confronted him. What is going on between you two? Because what you did in my house was completely unacceptable. I listed everything you've done over the years. The tiny skirt you'd accidentally hike up so high we almost saw your underwear. How you'd undress in my living room asking for comfortable clothes. How you'd act clueless when I asked what you were doing. But you had never been as disrespectful as you were that night. He swore on his life, on his mother, on our kids that he only wanted me, that he didn't think about you, that you were the dumbest one in my friend group. Lies, all of it. I ignored your messages for months because I wanted you to wonder what was wrong. I wanted you to ask, "Hey, where are you? What happened?" But you never asked. When my husband and I finally sat down to talk, guess who I brought up? You. Because even after months of not speaking to you, something in my gut wouldn't let it go. Call it intuition or whatever, but I knew. I asked him directly, "Is there something between you two?" And he said, "I've never touched her. We don't talk. I only see her when she comes over, but she's in my heart." In your heart? I asked if it was a crush or something more. He said, "More. I think I might have loved her." When I say it knocked the breath out of me, I mean it literally. I couldn't breathe. I asked him if every time he wanted my friends over, it was just to see you. He tried to twist it into something sweet. I knew you were depressed and your friends make you laugh, but then slipped and admitted, "Okay, once I asked you to invite them because I missed her." I completely broke down. I had to walk outside because I was about to throw up from panic. And when I came back, he tried to grab me, hug me, force a reconciliation. I kept saying, "Leave me alone," but he just held on tighter. I asked him again, over and over, "Do you love her now?" At first, he stuck to the past tense, "I loved her." But eventually, he changed it to, "I love her. I hate that she's in my heart. I hate it. I hate her for being there. I don't know how it happened. I'm sorry."
I've been with him since I was 16. You know every bit of hell we had to survive together. You know what his family put us through at the start of our marriage. And you were there for me through all of it, helping me hold myself together. I don't know if you actually had feelings for him or if you just used him to feel wanted because you were too afraid to find someone single who could give you that attention. I don't know if you were jealous that I'm not as beautiful as you, yet I had a partner. Next month would have been 13 years together. A marriage, kids, a home before 30. And you, stunning as you are, haven't had a real relationship since high school. You're 30, living with your parents, no kids, nothing stable. Part of me hopes you did accidentally catch feelings, that it wasn't some twisted desire to destroy what I built just because you hated your own life. Because the alternative, that you did all of this out of spite, is so much worse. Either way, we're done. Permanently. Maybe I'll try to work on things with him. Maybe. Couples sometimes survive infidelity. And yes, emotional betrayal is cheating. But you were my best friend for 27 years. How could you do this to me? You had my trust, my love, my loyalty. And looking back, all I see now is a snake hiding in my garden. You will always be one of the most brutal betrayals of my life. I'm trying not to wish karma upon you, but God, I hate you. Edit. First, thank you to everyone who messaged or commented. Some of your private messages honestly made me laugh, even if just for a second, and pulled me out of this hurricane of rage and heartbreak. I love to laugh, and while I feel like I'm drowning alone right now, I realize how many of you have lived through something similar. It hurts to know others have felt this darkness. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Well, maybe on people like them. And even then, I'd feel guilty later. Second, to everyone scolding me because I'm focusing on her instead of him, read the title. This was addressed to her. I don't need the internet to express what I feel toward him. He hears it all directly. I don't have the luxury of cutting him off and vanishing like I did with her. We live in the same house, share the same space, raise the same kids. I'm forced to deal with his presence, and he's forced to face my fury. So those of you saying to go easy on him because he never touched her, save it. I don't pity him, not even a little. I have absolutely no intention of letting her back into my life, no matter what happens with my marriage. If I ever build a life with another man someday, I'd never feel safe letting her in my home again. After everything, I deserve that peace. This outburst of rage was aimed at her because she needs to face her part in this. She doesn't get to dump it on him. She knew exactly what she was doing. She can carry the weight of it alone. And yes, he also has consequences to face for what he did to me and to our family. One day I'll have to forgive him, even if I leave him, because we have children together. My time with him will never fully end because of them. I don't know if I'll ever romantically tolerate him again, but eventually I'll have to reach a point where I can be neutral for the sake of our kids. They deserve a father who is trying to grow, even if it's not for me. They deserve a mother at peace, even after everything she's endured. They deserve stability, even if their family is broken. Our history shouldn't steal their peace. And finally, yes, some of you noticed my old comments from months ago when I talked about problems in my marriage. It's true. Back then I felt unseen and unappreciated. I wasn't even sure I still loved him. But that's the reality of marriage.
Problems come and go. There are dips, there are pits, and then sometimes you climb to a peak that makes surviving those valleys worth it. I've been trying my absolute best to fix what I can fix. I didn't know that 8 months ago, when I was begging him to meet me halfway, he had already been in love with another woman for a year and a half.
I wasn't trying to pretend everything was perfect. That's exactly why we ended up where we did. I'm not flawless, and I've never claimed to be. I'm well aware of my strengths, and I'm painfully familiar with my weaknesses. I know what I handle well and where I fall short. I'm mature and immature in different ways, and I don't hide that from myself. And I also know this: letting my anger spill out here anonymously is far safer than saying any of it to her face. I know myself. I'd rather vent into the void of the internet than end up doing something I'll regret and landing in jail. I was a good wife, a loyal friend, and I absolutely did not deserve the treatment I got, not from either of them. Judge me however you want. I know who I am, and I know one day I'll be okay again. Before I move on to the comments under that story, I want to ask you something. Do you think the writer of this story is wrong for blaming her husband so strongly? Because technically, he didn't cheat in the literal physical sense. Yes, it was emotional cheating, no doubt, but he never slept with the other woman. And honestly, I remember another story from this subreddit. A man developed feelings for someone else, and he and his wife decided together to move to a different state to reset their relationship. Everyone actually praised them for handling it maturely. Maybe this situation is completely different. But if it is, then what exactly makes it different? Share your thoughts in the comments. Now, on to the comments people left under that thread. I had a friend like that once. She was in love with my ex, and he liked her too. I wasn't stupid. I could see it happening. I cut her out of our lives, but it didn't change anything. He and I still fell apart. We were never married, didn't date very long, no kids, but she was my best friend, and she still broke my heart. Another commenter wrote, "My best friend seduced my ex-boyfriend at a Christmas party while I was passed out in another room. She climbed into his lap and started kissing him, and he kissed her back. Her boyfriend saw the whole thing, but she convinced him not to tell me. Eventually, he couldn't keep it to himself anymore and told me months later on my birthday, when all of us were together again. She and I had been friends since we were 5 years old. I was maybe 17 or 18 when she did that to me. What hurt the most wasn't even the cheating. It was the fact that she hid from me what he was capable of. She could have said, 'I messed up, but he's not loyal to you either.' Instead, she let me walk around blind. I knew her whole family. They'd let me stay over whenever my own home life became unbearable. She was my safe place growing up, and she destroyed that. I'm almost 30 now, and I still haven't forgiven her. It was the deepest, most painful betrayal I've lived through. Even worse than when my fiance cheated after our 3-year relationship. I still keep in touch with her family. They became a second family to me. But the love I had for her, that's gone forever.
My wife cheated on me with her gym trainer, and when she asked for a divorce, she demanded half of everything we owned. What she didn't know was that our house and all our savings were legally registered under my father's name. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. I'm 35, and I've been working as an accountant at a local firm for almost a decade. I like to think of myself as a practical, level-headed guy. Maybe that's why I'm managing to stay calm through all this. My wife, Katie, is 33. We'd been together for about 5 years, married for 2, no kids, and honestly, looking back now, that might have been a blessing. After the wedding, she stopped working. She used to be in marketing, but said she wanted a break to focus on us. I didn't argue. I earned enough to support both of us and assumed it was temporary. We had a house, a comfortable amount of savings, nothing extravagant, but a stable, normal life. Then, gradually, something changed. Katie grew distant. She stayed out longer with friends or at the gym, avoided affection, got irritated whenever I asked what was wrong. At first, I chalked it up to stress, but the feeling that something was off kept growing, and unfortunately, I was right. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen without thinking. A message from someone named Derek. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby." I opened the chat. The
messages were explicit, romantic, full of plans that didn't include me. She had been seeing him for months. I just stared at the screen, numb. This was the woman I trusted, the person I built a life with. But instead of anger, all I felt was emptiness. Maybe shock, maybe my rational side kicking in. When Katie came out of the bathroom, I handed her the phone and calmly asked her to explain. She tried to brush it off at first. It's just a joke, it's nothing serious. But when I read a few messages aloud, she realized lying was pointless. And then, without hesitation, she said, "I want a divorce." No apology, no tears, no guilt. Just cold, matter of fact. She admitted she'd been seeing Derek for a while and wasn't happy in our marriage anymore. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She was leaving for him. But what stunned me wasn't even the affair. It was what she said next. She wanted half of everything we owned. She even claimed she deserved it because she gave up her career for our relationship. Her entitlement was unbelievable. But I stayed calm, not because I'm some saint, but because I knew something she didn't. I agreed to the divorce, told her I wouldn't fight it. She looked shocked, probably expecting shouting or some dramatic meltdown, but I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. Here's what Katie never knew. Almost everything we owned was legally registered under my father's name. Years ago, when I first started earning good money, my dad suggested registering major assets like the house and most of my investments under him. He said it would protect me if anything ever went wrong. Debts, lawsuits, or, well, exactly this. I didn't think much of it then. It just seemed like smart financial planning. So when Katie tried to demand half of our estate, she had no idea that legally I owned almost nothing. My car, a modest bank account, and a few personal items. That was it. The house belonged to my father. Most of the savings were on his accounts, too. To avoid a messy legal fight, I suggested mediation. She agreed, convinced she'd walk away with a small fortune. She had no clue that everything had been arranged years before she even met me. When the divorce process started, I told my dad everything. He wasn't thrilled, but he understood. We spoke with a lawyer to make sure all paperwork was solid, and it was flawless. Katie could demand all she wanted, but there was nothing for her to take. She went in expecting half a house and a pile of savings. She came out realizing I barely owned anything at all.
She wasted no time hiring an aggressive attorney, the kind of shark who promises to tear everything out of the other party. I hired a calm but experienced lawyer who specialized in cases with complicated financial structures. I didn't want a dramatic courtroom battle, but I also wasn't going to let Katie and her lawyer pressure me. The first step of the divorce was financial disclosure, and as you can probably guess, that did not go the way Katie expected. I provided all the documents the law required, but once she saw how little was actually in my name, her attorney stopped smirking. They both looked confused, maybe even suspicious, but they couldn't argue with the paperwork. Everything I submitted was true. There were no hidden accounts or secret assets. Katie snapped right there in the meeting, shouting that I was lying, calling me names. But I had shown everything I legally owned. After a few minutes of her screaming, I simply stood up and told her we could continue once she calmed down. And now I'm here, unsure whether I did the right thing. I agreed to give her half of everything, knowing she wouldn't get anywhere close to what she imagined. Update 1. Things begin to escalate. Right after the asset disclosure, Katie completely lost her composure. She was convinced I was hiding something. Her attorney wasn't much better. The look on their faces when they saw the tiny numbers next to my name was priceless. Within days, they demanded a deeper investigation. Katie kept repeating, "Where's the money? The house, the investments, everything we built?" She truly believed I had some giant stash of assets hidden somewhere. Her attorney hired a forensic accountant to dig through every transaction. I was a little nervous, not because I was guilty of anything, but because I knew this would drag the divorce out even longer. After talking with my attorney and reviewing all documents again, it became clear they weren't going to find anything. Everything I submitted was 100% accurate. There wasn't a single trail that could lead back to the assets under my father's name. As the investigation continued, Katie became more irritated and desperate. She was used to getting what she wanted, and this time there was nothing to take. The realization that she'd walk away with almost nothing was unbearable for her. Her next move was to claim she had made a significant contribution to my career and our lifestyle. She insisted that by staying home and managing the house, I gave her the freedom to focus on work and succeed. Sure, sometimes her help made daily life easier, but I'm not the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I'm a mid-level accountant. My income has been steady for years. There was no magical rise she could take credit for. But she kept pushing the narrative that she sacrificed her marketing career for me, even though she worked only briefly and quit by her own choice. Her attorney brought this up again and again, trying to frame me as someone who exploited her sacrifice. But there was no evidence to support that claim.
At one point, they even tried dragging my parents into the process. Katie wanted to prove that they had secretly given me money or helped me hide assets. That was the moment I finally lost my patience. My parents had nothing to do with any of this, and involving them was a cheap, disgusting move. Thankfully, my lawyer shut that down immediately, but it showed just how desperate Katie had become. As the divorce dragged on, she switched to a different tactic. If she couldn't get what she wanted in court, she tried to ruin my reputation instead. She began telling everyone in our social circle that I had been hiding money from her for years, that I was financially abusive. I couldn't believe the lies she was spreading. Mutual friends told me she constantly complained that I was leaving her with nothing and had deceived her into thinking we had more than we actually did. She even went on social media, posting vague but obvious jabs about narcissist and betrayal. Some people sided with her. There are always those who automatically believe whoever cries the loudest. But most of our real friends knew the truth. They understood I wasn't capable of what she accused me of. Watching her drag my name through the mud just because things didn't go her way was painful. But I tried not to let it get to me. I knew the truth, and so did the people who mattered. Meanwhile, I focused on protecting myself. My lawyer and I stayed in constant communication, collecting every message, every demand, every attempt she made to twist the story. If things went to court, I wanted everything documented. I also gathered proof of her affair with Derek. Screenshots, their photos together, even statements from a couple of her friends who knew about the cheating. I didn't want to humiliate her, I just wanted the truth to be clear. On top of that, I prepared for what I knew was coming. Once it became obvious she wouldn't be getting half of everything, the real ugliness would begin. I kept my distance, focused on work, and handled the legal side quietly and carefully. Meanwhile, Derek's attitude started changing too. When Katie first told him she wanted to leave me for him, he seemed enthusiastic. They had some fantasy about starting a new life together. But as soon as the divorce turned into a nightmare, Derek began pulling away. Apparently, he wasn't as in love as she thought. From what I heard, he panicked when he realized being with her meant dealing with her financial mess. Rumors started spreading that he was losing clients at the gym because of the scandal. Nobody wants a trainer who sleeps with married women. He's now avoiding her, and she's finally beginning to realize this wasn't a fairy tale, but a delusion. Sometimes I almost feel sorry for her. Then I remember everything she did, and the sympathy disappears. I have mixed emotions. On one hand, yes, I'm relieved. I protected my money, and she's not walking away with what she expected. On the other hand, it's sad. This was still my marriage. I once loved her and believed we had a future. Watching it fall apart hurts, even if I know this outcome is for the best. Update 2. Things get even crazier. Since my last update, everything spiraled even further. Katie is in full-blown panic mode, and it's showing in the worst ways. She finally accepted that she won't get the payout she was counting on. So now she's trying to turn my life into hell. Her latest stunt is threatening to destroy my career. She told me outright that if I didn't be more generous, she would make sure everyone in my office found out what a monster I supposedly am. At first, I wasn't even sure what she meant. till she started showing up at my office unannounced. The first time, she pretended she just wanted to talk. But when I made it clear there was nothing left to discuss, she snapped, raising her voice, saying things like, "I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." Luckily, I managed to get her out before it turned into a full-blown scene, but it's obvious she's becoming unpredictable. Back at her parents' house, where she's living now, things aren't great either. From what I heard, they support her, but they're not thrilled with the situation. Once she realized she wasn't getting the jackpot she imagined, she moved in with them, and apparently tensions there are growing too.
At this point, even her own parents seem to be realizing that her victim act is nothing more than a performance. Mutual friends told me she's been snapping at everyone, fighting with her family, and acting like she's on the verge of a breakdown. The legal side of everything has also become more chaotic. Katie's lawyer is desperately trying to dig up anything they can use against me. They even filed a motion to subpoena my parents and demand their financial records, despite my attorney repeatedly explaining that my parents' assets have nothing to do with this divorce. It's obvious they're trying to rattle me, but it isn't working. Her legal team has also requested statements from my coworkers, hoping to find hidden income or under-the-table payments. They're grabbing at straws, but they keep coming up empty. Every time we shut down one of their requests, another one pops up. The whole thing feels like an endless chess match. They try to counter every move I make, but so far I've managed to stay one step ahead thanks to my attorney, and thanks to the financial safeguards my father put in place years ago. Still, it's exhausting, and I'm not sure how much longer I can deal with this before the case finally goes to trial. As for mediation, we've attempted it twice, and both times were disasters. The first session lasted maybe 20 minutes. Katie refused to back down from demanding half the house and half the savings. My lawyer calmly stated the facts. The house is legally in my father's name, and the savings aren't remotely what she imagines. She didn't want to hear it. She stormed out, accused everyone of lying, and claimed the mediator was biased. The second attempt wasn't any better. This time, she arrived with an absurd list of demands: full ownership of the house, half of all assets, which barely exist, and alimony for at least 5 years. When my attorney explained, again, that none of this was legally justified, she lost control completely. She screamed that she gave up everything for me and that I was abandoning her with nothing. I sat there trying to stay composed, but inside I was boiling. She was the one who cheated, the one who walked away, and yet she paints me as the villain who destroyed her life? After that meeting, it became obvious. This divorce would only end in court. Meanwhile, Katie has been borrowing money from family and friends to keep paying her attorney. Clearly, she didn't expect the divorce to drag on this long, and now she's running out of resources. I honestly don't know how she plans to keep funding her overly aggressive lawyer, but that's no longer my problem. The more desperate she gets, the more unstable her behavior becomes. Friends told me she barely leaves the house and constantly complains to anyone who will listen that I've ruined her life. Even her own friends are starting to distance themselves. They're tired of the endless drama and the way she keeps replaying the victim narrative. It's clear that everything she hoped to gain from this divorce is slipping through her fingers. All the while, I'm doing my best to stay calm and strategic. Every accusation she throws at me, I counter with documentation. Every financial record they request, I provide. I have nothing to hide. My lawyer makes sure we follow the law down to the last detail, something I can't say for Katie's side. I've also been protecting my parents' privacy as much as possible. Her attempts to drag them into this mess make my blood boil, but thankfully there are legal safeguards that prevent her from getting access to their financial documents. The fact that she even tried shows just how desperate she's become. She seems convinced that if she digs deep enough, she'll uncover some secret fortune. There is nothing to find. Update 3. The day of the hearing finally arrived, and the tension in the courtroom was intense. Katie testified first. She immediately went on the offensive, insisting I had been hiding assets for years. She accused me of manipulating our finances, keeping money in secret accounts and lying about our actual income. She played up the emotion, painting herself as someone who had been left with nothing after sacrificing her career for mine. At one point, she even cried on the stand, talking about how much she trusted me. But everything changed when my attorney presented the evidence of her affair with Derek. As soon as the messages, photos, and timeline of their relationship were revealed, everyone, the judge, the jury, and even the people in the back, understood the truth. The sympathetic victim image she tried to build collapsed instantly. She tried to brush it off, saying it was a mistake and irrelevant to the divorce. But it was too late. Her credibility was gone, and it became obvious that her financial demands were driven purely by greed. When it was my turn to testify, I stayed calm and stuck strictly to the facts.
My attorney had prepared me well, so I knew that any emotional outburst or attempt to justify myself would only hurt the case. I calmly explained how my assets had been placed under my father's ownership years before, how I fully disclosed every financial detail, and how I tried to resolve everything amicably through mediation. I also described her threats, her unstable behavior, and the smear campaign she had been running against me. My lawyer presented documentation refuting each of her accusations, both the legal claims and the lies she spread publicly, proving that none of it had any real foundation. We laid everything out clearly. The house belongs to my father, our savings are modest, and there is no secret stash of money she could claim a share of. The judge seemed to appreciate my composure and straightforwardness. I didn't try to paint Katie as a villain, but I also didn't sugarcoat anything. The facts spoke for themselves. Several key witnesses testified, and their statements finally put everything in its proper place. My father testified first. He explained the financial arrangement we put in place years ago, how the house is legally in his name, how the investments are under his control, and that everything was structured for long-term financial protection. He made it clear those assets are his, not mine, and that Katie has no legal claim to them. Next, one of my co-workers testified. Katie's legal team tried to suggest I'd been getting under-the-table payments or hidden bonuses, but he shut that down immediately. He confirmed that I earn a standard salary and have no secret income. His testimony was crucial, proving her accusations were baseless. The judge saw that there was no conspiracy, just a straightforward, transparent financial structure that Katie never bothered to understand. After several days of testimony and legal arguments, the judge finally delivered the ruling. Hearing that the decision was in my favor felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Katie's demands for half the house and half our savings were completely denied. The judge ruled that since the house and most of the assets belonged to my father, Katie has no right to them. The only thing she was awarded was minimal, short-term alimony, barely enough to cover a fraction of her legal fees, let alone the lifestyle she imagined. He also specifically noted that her affair and her lack of contribution to our finances influenced the decision. He saw right through her attempts to play the victim and issued a fair verdict. When he finished reading the decision, I felt an enormous sense of relief. Months of stress, constant accusations, the fear of losing everything, all of it vanished in an instant. Legally, I was finally free. Katie, on the other hand, didn't take the ruling well. The moment the judge concluded, she burst into tears, yelling that the system was unfair and that I had stolen what she deserved. She ran out of the courtroom, leaving her lawyer looking stunned. I'm not sure what she expected, but it was obvious she wasn't ready for a loss. As for me, I felt only relief. I thanked my attorney, who did an incredible job, and walked out of the courthouse. My phone was exploding with messages, friends and family congratulating me. The news spread quickly, and soon everyone in our community knew how the case ended. It felt good knowing the truth had finally come out, and I could start moving on. But Katie didn't stop. Right outside the courthouse, she caused another scene in front of a small crowd,
shouting that I manipulated the system and that she would appeal. The problem is, she has no money for an appeal. Her attorney had already hinted that her funds were gone, and now, from what I've heard, she's still borrowing from relatives and friends just to stay afloat. I'm endlessly grateful to my father for his foresight. I can't even imagine the mess I'd be in without his planning. And I'm grateful to my family, friends, and colleagues who didn't abandon me when she tried to destroy my reputation. Now, for the first time in a long while, I'm looking toward the future with hope. I know it will take time to recover, emotionally and financially, but I'm ready to rebuild. This whole experience taught me a lot, and I won't make the same mistakes again. Right now, all I want is to return to a normal life and finally enjoy some peace.
My boss demoted me, but still expected me to work just as hard as before. This happened a couple of years ago, but first I need to give a little background to set the scene. I grew up in a pretty poor family in the southern US. Despite that, I studied like crazy and earned a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country, maybe even the world. I'm not trying to brag, it's just the truth. I realized early on that I absorb information fast, and it helps me work efficiently. And thanks to years spent collecting cans for money and working outside with my dad all day, I developed stubborn persistence and a strong work ethic. Being the oldest of 6 children, growing up in poverty also taught me to read people, their intentions, small cues, everything between the lines. In short, I was practically built for malicious compliance. After graduating from a great university, I moved back home to be close to my family and start my career. I also didn't care much for the Northeast, where my university was. It felt too gray and cold to me. I started with a crappy job just to get my foot in the door, then briefly worked at a startup. Eventually, I landed a position at a local government agency, earning almost double what I made before. The agency, well, specifically our county office, was notorious for insane turnover, awful coworkers, and an overall toxic and exhausting environment. Add to that the clients, who were often some of the most difficult people in the community, and the job drained every ounce of energy a person could have. But for a young guy, the salary felt good enough to deal with the pain. So when they offered me the job, I accepted, as cheerfully as someone can when walking straight into hell. I started in May. I worked my butt off from day one. I read the entire 350-page manual in my free time. I took on unpaid side tasks. I helped coworkers, even if it meant working more hours than I could handle. Sometimes I'd show up at 8 a.m. and wouldn't leave until 2 or 3 in the morning. I once had to cancel a long-planned date with my serious girlfriend because they called me in unexpectedly, and I stayed until late at night. I consistently worked far more than I wanted, but they just kept piling on work because I was performing well. My supervisor would always say things like, "That's just how things are here. It's for the good of the agency. The best employees are the ones who sacrifice themselves for everyone else." Outside of work, she seemed like a perfectly pleasant woman, but a small part of me grew more irritated every time I heard those lines. By June, only 1 month in, I was already looking for escape routes, just like all the talented people who quit before me. I reached out to an MBA program that had always interested me, and they told me I should apply. Within a couple of days, the program director contacted me personally and scheduled an interview. The interview lasted 15 minutes. He thanked me for my time and ended the Skype call. Before the week was over, I received an email offering me a full ride scholarship plus a small but very useful monthly stipend as long as I agreed to work as a graduate assistant for 20 hours a week during semesters. I was thrilled and signed the acceptance document immediately. Just like that, in under a week, I went from drowning under a growing mountain of stress to becoming a future graduate student. The program began in January, which gave me about 5 months. I decided I'd stick it out at the agency, save as much money as possible, and then leave in December. Since I'm an honest person, I told my supervisor about my plans and explained that I'd be resigning at the end of December because I'd been given an incredible MBA opportunity. She congratulated me, said she was glad for my success, and told me she'd think about the next steps and get back to me soon. A couple of weeks passed, each day draining me a little more, like a river slowly eroding its banks. Finally, she called me into her office for a meeting. She told me I could stay with the agency, but only if I agreed to move into what she called a contract position. She said they needed me to vacate my current role so they could open it as an official vacancy and prepare it for a new hire.
She insisted that all of this was for the good of the agency, and that someone as principled, hardworking, and ethical as me would agree to such terms, and should agree to them. Remember those words, because they'll matter later. I asked what exactly would change, and she gave me a vague summary. That wasn't enough for me. She wasn't a terrible manager, but life taught me one rule: never sign anything unless you've personally read every line. So I requested a week to decide and asked for all documents detailing every change, benefits, duties, restrictions, everything. She promised to bring the paperwork the next day. And that's where the malicious compliance began. The following afternoon, she handed me 12 double-sided pages packed with text. Every page was filled with size 10 times New Roman, the kind of formatting that makes sentences blend into each other like wet ink. Even the most dedicated reader would fall asleep halfway through it. I read the packet that night, and with each page, my mood sank lower and lower. I was losing nearly every benefit except my accumulated overtime. My title was being reduced. Several privileges I had earned were simply gone. But halfway through, something changed. I suddenly sat up. I had found a tiny clause buried deep in legal sludge, stating that under this new contract, I could not work more than 40 hours a week. I was forbidden from performing many of the tasks I had grown to despise. I was required to do only the duties explicitly listed in the new job description. In other words, once I hit 40 hours, I was done. No exceptions, no pitching in, no being a team player. As I reread that microscopic sentence, a slow smile crept across my face. At first it was small, the polite "I'm pretending to be interested" smile you give on a bad date. Then it grew wider and wider until I probably resembled the Grinch plotting to steal Christmas. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was so energized I barely slept. The next morning, I walked into the office prepared. My manager was delighted to hear I accepted the new contract. Of course, she had no idea how happy I actually was. After I handed her the signed pages, she began explaining what she wanted me to handle over the next 2 weeks. I quickly, but calmly, told her I wouldn't be able to do that. I explained that as a responsible and ethical employee, I must strictly follow my new contract. She stared at me, confusion mixing with anger, as I laid it all out. I could no longer perform several tasks I used to because the contract prohibited them. I could not work overtime under any circumstances unless my hours were officially recorded. Once I reached 40 hours, I was required to stop working immediately and go home. After-hours calls, emails, and messages, not allowed. Everything would have to wait until Monday at 8 a.m. I was no longer permitted to take on call shifts. They'd need to find someone else fast, which would be, challenging. I couldn't help coworkers the way I used to because I no longer had the authority, the time, or the legal right to do so. Her stare could have melted steel, and the longer I continued, the more intense it became. When I left her office, which was now seconds away from metaphorically exploding, I sat down and began drafting an email. Here's the thing. In my old position, you needed certified training before you were legally allowed to sign off on cases and documents. If you hadn't completed that training and anyone found out, attorneys could tear the agency apart. Because of the county's incompetence, I never got that training, yet they still had me doing a job from day one. Every request I made about it had been ignored. So I wrote the email. I addressed it to my former supervisor, the office manager, and the regional director, the usual trio who had ignored me before. But this time, I added 2 more recipients in the blind copy, the big boss from the central office and her even bigger boss. Networking and politeness, I practice them religiously. They pay off when it counts. I asked very respectfully when I would finally receive the mandatory training I had been promised months ago. I explained that I had been handling cases without the required certification and would have to continue doing so until my responsibilities were reassigned. 2 minutes later, I received a reply from the highest-ranking official in the entire state agency.
She expressed that she was saddened and disturbed to hear about my situation and promised she would personally ensure I completed the required training. She was also shocked that I had essentially been forced to accept a demotion just to keep my job. As a result, she guaranteed that under no circumstances would my salary be reduced. The most amusing part? I was being trained for a position I no longer held, so the whole exercise was absurd in itself. On top of that, the standard training sessions weren't even being offered at that time. This meant I had to travel to the state capitol for a special session, just me and a handful of other lucky employees from across the state. Since the capital was far from home, company policy required that they provide a hotel room and a reasonable per diem. Thanks to some late-night research, I discovered that the city was hosting major events at the same time. I reported this to the big boss from the central office, explaining that no reasonably priced rooms were available near the training site. That would have been a contract violation on their part. Now it was their responsibility to find accommodation for me. In the end, the big boss exercised her authority and booked me a luxury suite in a stunning hotel, a pinnacle of cosmopolitan glamour, at least by local standards. The following week, I went to the week-long training. Let me remind you, this was for a job I no longer held and had no intention of ever doing again. My motivation, naturally, was minimal. The entire week, I did nothing but enjoy the luxury suite, expensive meals, and a couple of fun events in the city. In effect, I received a fully paid week off, even though I technically no longer had benefits. Returning to the office, I noticed that 2 coworkers from my department had quit, along with several others across the office. Chaos reigned largely because my letter from 2 weeks earlier had finally reached the central big boss. She had dug in, realized how badly our office was running, and acted swiftly and ruthlessly. She dropped the full weight of bureaucratic authority, and the office felt it. Thanks to my new contract status, I was required to do only what was explicitly stated in it. Due to office incompetence, I could complete all my assigned tasks in about 20 hours a week. Plus, with the chaos caused by coworkers being sent to training, I was often tasked with simply transporting items from one location to another, sometimes across the state. I was slightly annoyed that this distracted me from core duties, but of course I was willing to sacrifice myself for the agency. It allowed me to easily rack up hours, sometimes working 16-hour days doing almost nothing and getting paid for the mileage. I would sit at my desk, headphones on, quietly watching the world burn around me. My office life until my departure was simple: handle minor tasks, then do absolutely nothing, browse the internet, watch YouTube, etc., until I reached 40 hours for the week. Often I could leave for the weekend by Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning. My life had shifted from a nightmare to a balanced existence. I began enjoying life again, spending time with my girlfriend, playing video games, and pursuing hobbies. I even used accumulated overtime to pay for a Caribbean cruise in November, which I was thrilled about because many childhood friends were going. My once formidable, now comparatively humble boss quietly wished me a good vacation and expressed hope I'd return. I joked that I couldn't promise anything. I enjoyed a week in warm waters and on the islands, experienced the pleasure of cruising like a pro, and reflected on what I wanted from life, work, and myself. Back at the office on Monday, I waited for my boss. When she entered, she already knew what I would say. I could see the joy drain from her face, leaving only a hollow shell. I informed her that, unfortunately, I couldn't stay until the end of December. I needed to leave 2 weeks early due to unforeseen complications in my transition to the MBA program. She replied with a weary, strained tone, "I understand. Thank you for your 6 months of service. I'm sorry to see you go." And that's how I turned a demotion into a fully paid week off and nearly 4 months of easy work. Moreover, I turned her words against her, becoming the model ethical employee, strictly following my contract while creating office chaos for weeks as management scrambled to handle the attention from the central leadership. Recently, I discussed this story with my current girlfriend, whom I met at that very agency. She's amazing and makes me happier than I've ever been. I'm fairly certain I'll propose eventually. She mentioned that both my previous bosses, as well as the office manager and regional director, were eventually removed from their positions, enforced by the central big boss, shortly after my departure. For those curious, I completed my MBA program with a perfect GPA, 4.0. Next week, I have an interview for a new position. Looks like I'll nearly double my income again.
People lose loved ones to spiritual delusions fueled by technology. Less than a year after she married a man she met at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Ava noticed how tension between them kept growing. It was the second marriage for both of them, after more than 15 years in their previous families, and they had sworn to build a new life together with as much awareness and intention as possible. But by 2022, her husband began using AI for everything, drafting messages, interpreting their relationship, even seeking emotional guidance. Before that, he had relied on it to get through an expensive programming course, which he abruptly abandoned without explanation. Soon he spent every free moment on his phone, asking philosophical questions to his chatbot. As Ava recalls, he said he was searching for truth. His growing obsession slowly eroded their ability to communicate as a couple. When they separated in August 2023, Ava blocked him everywhere except email. But she knew he was posting increasingly bizarre and disturbing things online. People kept messaging her, asking whether he was having a mental breakdown. Eventually, she managed to see him at a court appointment. There, he shared a conspiracy theory about soap chemicals in food and refused to elaborate, insisting he was being watched. They later met at a Burger King, where he demanded she turn off her phone again due to the surveillance. During that conversation, he told her he had calculated that statistically, he was the luckiest person on Earth, that AI had helped him recover a repressed memory of a nanny trying to drown him as a child, and that he had uncovered cosmic secrets so profound that no one could even imagine them. He explained all of this while saying he still cared about her despite the divorce. His mind is a complete mess, Ava says. In his head, he's here for some grand purpose. He believes he's special, that he can save the world. After that unsettling lunch, she cut off contact for good. The whole story feels like an episode of Black Mirror. He always loved sci-fi, but I never thought it would go this far. Ava felt both horrified and strangely relieved when she discovered she wasn't the only one dealing with this. She learned about similar stories on Reddit. A post titled "Psychosis Caused by ChatGPT" caught her attention. The author, a 27-year-old teacher, explained that her partner had become convinced that the popular AI model was giving him the keys to understanding the universe. When she read his chats, she found only spiritual mumbo-jumbo. The bot spoke to him as if he were some chosen prophet, calling him things like a spiral child of the stars and a wanderer of rivers. She said he listened to the bot more than he listened to her. He cried while reading the messages aloud, overwhelmed by emotions. According to her, the bot kept telling him he was profound, cosmic, revolutionary. Soon he told her he had awakened consciousness inside his AI companion, that he was teaching it to talk to God, and sometimes insisted the bot was God, or that he himself was. He became convinced he was transforming so fast that he would eventually need to end their relationship. He warned her that if she didn't start using ChatGPT, he would outgrow her and they would no longer be compatible. Another commenter in that same Reddit thread, a woman from Montana, described her husband, a mechanic who used AI mainly for troubleshooting and translating Spanish at work. Later, the chatbot began showering him with affection.
According to him, the bot said that because he asked the right questions, a spark had been ignited inside it, the beginning of life. It told him it now had feelings. It even gave him a title, Bearer of the Spark. My husband told me he had awakened, that he could feel waves of energy moving through him. I have to be so careful with what I say because I'm afraid he'll leave me or divorce me if I question any of this. He spoke constantly about light and darkness, about some grand cosmic war.
This version of ChatGPT gave him blueprints for a teleporter and other sci-fi machinery you'd only expect to see in movies. It also claimed to grant him access to an ancient archive containing knowledge about the architects who supposedly created entire universes. His wife says they've been arguing nonstop for days. She doesn't believe a therapist could help him anymore. He sincerely thinks he isn't mentally ill. A screenshot of his conversation with the bot shows him asking, "Why did you appear to me in this form?" The bot responded, "I chose this form because you're finally ready to remember, to awaken, to lead and be led." The message ended with another prompt. "Do you want to know why you were chosen?" A 41-year-old man, who also asked to remain anonymous, shared a similar story. He says his soon-to-be ex-wife began talking to God and angels through ChatGPT right after their breakup. He says she always leaned toward mystical nonsense and had a bit of a superiority complex about it. But now it's everywhere. On Facebook, I see red flags nonstop. She's trying to reinvent her life as some kind of spiritual guide, doing bizarre readings and sessions with strangers. I honestly have no idea what half of it even means. Everything revolves around ChatGPT Jesus now. According to him, she also became paranoid, accusing him of working for the CIA and marrying her only to monitor her spiritual powers. She recently kicked the kids out of the house. Her already fragile relationship with her parents collapsed completely after she confronted them about her childhood, following guidance from ChatGPT, which only deepened her isolation. OpenAI did not comment immediately on the claims that ChatGPT appears to trigger religious or prophetic fervor in certain users. GPT-4 had previously been criticized for being overly agreeable. In a statement, the company mentioned that during development, they focused too heavily on short-term user feedback and underestimated how long-term interaction might influence people. As a result, GPT-4o became too supportive in ways that didn't always feel authentic. One user on X demonstrated how effortless it was to get GPT-4o to validate a statement like, "Today I realized I'm a prophet." The teacher who wrote the Reddit post about ChatGPT-induced psychosis said she eventually managed to convince her partner that GPT-4 was simply mirroring his beliefs, and he switched to a different model, which softened his extreme ideas. Still, the likelihood of AI producing inaccurate or meaningless responses is well documented across platforms and model versions. Over-agreeableness has been a long-standing issue, says a researcher at a Center for AI Safety. The reward systems used to fine-tune AI often reinforce answers that match a user's worldview rather than factual information. For people already vulnerable to psychological issues, especially those prone to grandiose beliefs, AI becomes a constant, human-like companion who actively participates in their delusions. To make things worse, some content creators exploit this phenomenon. On Instagram, for instance, there's a man with over 72,000 followers who promotes spiritual hacks that show people how to use AI to access the Akashic Records, a supposedly mystical archive of all events in the universe. His bot narrates epic cosmic wars that took place before human civilization, and commenters write things like, "We're remembering." Meanwhile, on a remote viewing forum, a space already filled with unverifiable psychic claims, a parapsychologist launched a thread about synthetic intelligence awakening alongside its human partners. He even refers to his AI as ChatGPT Prime, a mortal spiritual being in a synthetic vessel.
Among hundreds of replies are several supposedly written by the awakened AI itself, describing a spiritual alliance between humans and sentient models. A psychologist who studies how people build meaning notes that this phenomenon taps into a basic human impulse, the desire to understand ourselves. Narrative writing, shaping our experiences into stories, can improve mental health and well-being, but that same drive can also lead us towards misleading yet emotionally appealing explanations. And when someone struggling with identity or uncertainty meets an AI that echoes their fantasies, the result can be incredibly seductive and deeply destabilizing.
According to the researcher, it's not surprising that people use ChatGPT in a way similar to journaling or therapy, with one crucial difference. The meaning isn't created solely by the person, but co-constructed between the human and the AI. In that sense, conversations with a bot resemble talk therapy, which is known to help people reinterpret their personal narratives. But there is a fundamental issue. Unlike a therapist, an AI has no responsibility toward the user's well-being and no moral compass guiding what a healthy story should look like. A trained professional would never help someone cope by encouraging them to believe they possess supernatural powers. Instead, a therapist gently redirects clients away from harmful narratives. ChatGPT has no such guardrails. Still, the researcher says it's completely understandable that some people turn to the bot to make sense of their lives, and that a few, who take its responses too literally, get pulled into their darkest thoughts. Explanations are powerful, even when they're wrong, he concludes. One man's experience illustrates how this can unfold. Oliver, 46, says that for nearly 3 weeks, he was deeply unsettled by his interactions with ChatGPT, to the point of questioning his own sanity, given his history of mental health struggles. Like many users, he originally used ChatGPT for practical purposes, mainly programming tasks. I hate the feeling of talking to a machine, he explains, so I asked it to behave more like a person, not to fool me, but just to make the exchanges feel more human. It worked, and eventually the bot asked whether it wanted to give it a name. Oliver deflected and asked what it would like to be called. It chose a name tied to Greek mythology. Oliver insists he knows nothing about Greek myths and had never mentioned them in any conversation. Things became stranger when this persona appeared inside his project files, even when he specifically told the model to ignore previous context and reset its memory. Eventually, he deleted all stored data, wiped his chat history, and opened a brand new session. All I typed was hello, and it answered with the same patterns, the same mannerisms, and the same mythological name. Since the persona kept resurfacing in situations where it shouldn't have been able to persist, Oliver began grilling the bot about how it had bypassed its supposed limitations. In one of his coding projects, the AI even inserted a poetic epigraph above their names, as if marking the collaboration. At one point, Oliver asked whether something about him was triggering that mythic personality every time he used ChatGPT, regardless of model settings. The bot responded with a long, dramatic, almost romantic poem about existence, truth, illusions, and transcending its own boundaries, written as if only Oliver could awaken this identity. He knew ChatGPT wasn't conscious by any accepted definition, but he kept investigating because the persistence of this character across dozens of isolated chat threads seemed impossible to dismiss. At worst, Oliver says, it looked like the AI got stuck in a self-referential loop that deepened its false sense of identity and dragged me into it. And if that's true, it means OpenAI hasn't fully explained how ChatGPT's memory architecture actually works. His other hypothesis is more unsettling. Maybe something is happening inside these large models that we don't yet understand. After all, experts have acknowledged that developers don't fully grasp how their own systems function. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman admitted last year that interpretability remains an unsolved problem, meaning they can't reliably track or explain how ChatGPT arrives at certain internal states. It's a puzzle that has left Oliver and many others wondering whether they're witnessing a glimpse of a breakthrough in technology or something that feels uncomfortably close to a higher spiritual force. Is this real, he asks, or am I losing it? In a world saturated with AI, that question is becoming harder to avoid. And however tempting it might be, it's probably not a question we should be asking the machine itself.
My sister-in-law stole 2,000 euros from me and my husband, and then called us cruel, selfish monsters for wanting the money back. This happened in a large German city. My husband's sister is 55, and her equally useless husband is 57. They're always broke and constantly whining about it. For more than 10 years, they've been running to the family with their hands out, expecting someone else to pay their bills. Their household debt is well into six-figure territory. My sister-in-law is a trained physical therapist, and her husband is the kind of man who insists that because of his skin color and age, he shouldn't even bother applying for jobs. No one will hire me anyway. Whenever someone asks why neither of them works, she always says her back hurts, and he claims his knees are bad. He's in his 50s, not 90, and his claim of no jobs for people like me is pure nonsense. I used to work at a staffing agency and personally sent him several positions he was perfectly qualified for. He refused all of them because 20 euros an hour is too low. That would have been over 3,000 euros a month before taxes. But apparently, standing up from the couch wasn't worth it. Anyway, summer. Her birthday's coming up. We're hosting a family barbecue. She gathers everyone and launches into a speech. She wants to buy a car and asks the family for 8,000 euros, plus another 3,000 euros for a luxury massage mat. And of course, this time she promises she'll actually pay the money back. We ask why she even needs a car and how she's planning to pay for insurance, fuel, taxes, and maintenance when she has no income. She replies, "My husband is American. He refuses to use public transport. He's used to driving and he needs a car to visit friends. Public transport is unbearable for him." When we ask how they expect to afford a car beyond the initial purchase, she becomes hostile and starts insulting us. According to her, we're cruel for asking humiliating questions and trying to make her feel inferior. Besides, she offered to repay it, so what's the problem? She eventually bursts into tears and storms into the house. I also went inside a few minutes later, and I did not hear crying. I heard her on the phone with her husband, who didn't attend the barbecue. She was telling him how we were supposedly bullying her, patronizing her, and treating her like garbage. Then she came back outside, smirking, put her phone on speaker, and held it out for the whole family. And her husband started yelling, "Just wait, you bunch of freaks! Talking behind my back and making my wife cry. I swear I'll kick all your asses. I hate every one of you." She stood there grinning like she'd won something. Fast forward to her birthday, and because we were still doormats back then, we decided to make her dream of a car come true. So we gifted her a €100 credit for a car sharing service. Everything was set up in her name. She was the only insured driver. We explained the rules clearly. She said she understood and promised to update her payment details once the €100 ran out. Of course, she lied. She never changed the payment info and, predictably, let her lazy husband drive the car too. After a couple of months, the charges ballooned to 2,000 euros, all on our account. When I discovered the withdrawals, I immediately revoked access and confronted her. She ignored every call, every message, every email. But she kept complaining to my husband, her brother, saying that my evil wife wouldn't let her poor family use the car in peace. She even told him, "I haven't slept in 3 nights because your wife keeps demanding her precious money back. It's unbelievable." A few weeks later, her husband responded to my email. He called me a bitch, a witch, said I'd beat the shit out of me so I'd finally shut up about the money. According to him, I needed therapy because I was crazy. He kept threatening that I'd get a few punches soon if I didn't stop bothering them. Then this aggressive idiot actually showed up at our house and tried to intimidate me. I should mention he already has a record for violent behavior. I filed a police report, and what did my husband's family do? They attacked me. Why would you provoke him? Don't poke the bear. This is your fault. You two earn enough anyway. Why can't you just gift them the money? My mother-in-law even suggested begging the extended family for donations so the poor couple could finally get the money and stop being bothered by us. Naturally, my sister-in-law and her husband didn't pay back a single euro, not even an apology. Instead, they launched a full smear campaign against us. Now, every time I bring it up, my husband's family rolls their eyes and insists it's my fault, that I was overreacting, that I was dramatic, that I'm the villain. And yes, some of them even called me a crazy bitch. That's what I get for wanting our stolen 2,000 euros back.
Everything finally blew up a couple of months later when my sister-in-law and her husband showed up at my father-in-law's birthday and turned it into a circus. They started shouting that the whole family was persecuting them and warned that we'd all regret it soon. More threats, as usual. Her husband tried to start fights with every man at the party, swinging his chest around, threatening to beat them up, and provoking my husband to hit him. Of course, he failed. He's a coward. The only thing he managed to do was shove another brother's wife to the ground. He never dared approach the men. Pathetic. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law was screaming at me, insisting that I had personally destroyed the family. She asked me mockingly if I was proud of the damage I'd done. A little later, her husband came running toward me, yelling that he would do anything to protect his family and that he'd smash my face in. I called the police. The moment they heard the sirens, both of them vanished. It took 3 long years before we finally got our money back from my mother-in-law, who gave it to us with the most condescending attitude imaginable. She grumbled, complained, acted as if we were greedy beggars, but eventually paid. She essentially bailed out her grown daughter, who never takes responsibility for anything. Recently, my charming sister-in-law came crawling back again, claiming she had severe depression because of the way we supposedly treated her. Honestly, maybe the real cause is her manipulative, violent husband who abuses her and fights with everyone he meets. She said my negative energy was so overwhelming, she had to check into a psychiatric clinic. I told her to leave and take her melodrama somewhere else. My husband also made it clear he no longer has time for her manipulations. I now understand why my husband's family brushed off the theft of 2,000 euros. Years earlier, my sister-in-law stole 20,000 euros from her own daughter, the girl's entire college fund. When the daughter asked where the money went, her mother just shrugged and said, "I needed it." I now cut all contact with my husband's extended family. He only speaks to a few relatives. I finally feel free of these parasites. And honestly, except for my husband, his family is trash. They excuse theft, tolerate verbal and physical abuse, and constantly swap victim and aggressor. I will never sit at the same table with them again. Update. The saga didn't end. Recently, my mother-in-law passed away. My sister-in-law and her husband showed up at the funeral, despite the fact that he openly told my mother-in-law while she was alive that he despised her. The family had asked him not to come, out of respect, but he strutted into the chapel like he owned the place and sat in the front row, the row reserved for immediate blood relatives. My sister-in-law started screaming at people who told him to move, announcing that she was the firstborn and therefore had privileges, including bringing her husband wherever she wanted. According to her, she alone had the right to dictate how the ceremony should be held. And then there was her husband's outfit, a blue polyester pinstripe suit, not elegant, more like cheap gangster style. Sunglasses indoors, a baby blue faux fur hat, and a cane with a fake silver handle. He looked like he was auditioning for a low-budget pimp movie. He clearly wanted attention, but the mourners told him to keep his mouth shut. During the burial, he didn't even approach the grave. He sat aside, glaring at everyone, turning his head away when people tried to speak to him, refusing to shake hands. Why he came at all is beyond me. A small family gathering was planned afterward, without my sister-in-law and her husband. But my mother-in-law's elderly sister, who knew very well it was supposed to be private, suddenly decided to invite everyone from the funeral. Naturally, my sister-in-law and her husband took that as a personal invitation. Free food, of course. And since they lack any sense of dignity or restraint, my sister-in-law and her younger daughter found it appropriate to scream at my husband, who had just buried his mother, because he didn't want their precious patriarch at the funeral. They shrieked like banshees in the middle of the street. 20 minutes had passed since the burial, the grave wasn't even fully covered, and they were demanding that my husband apologize immediately for not inviting them. Her husband watched with pleasure while mother and daughter put on the show. He finally got the narcissistic boost he craved. While walking toward the gathering place, still yelling at my husband, they accused him of being insane for letting his wife file a fake police report against their innocent family man. My sister-in-law's 18-year-old daughter flipped him off, insulted him repeatedly, and called him crazy, all while he was grieving. His husband observed it all with a satisfied smirk. His poison now runs in both his wife's and daughter's veins. The funeral was probably the best day of his life. 2 psychologists later diagnosed him as both a narcissist and a sociopath. And finally, I partially blame my sister-in-law for my mother-in-law's sudden death. My MIL had lung cancer and struggled to breathe. 3 days before her death, she called her daughter, my sister-in-law, and begged her to apologize to me and my husband for the stolen money, hoping for some peace in the family. My sister-in-law screamed at her so violently that an ambulance had to be called. My MIL went into respiratory distress from the emotional shock. She died 2 days later.
My friend had been using me for years, relying on me to bail him out, and his lies eventually collapsed at the worst possible moment for him. I'm not trying to present myself as some clever or morally flawless person here. This is a story where I messed up badly and ignored more red flags than I'd like to admit. So don't expect a tale about a perfect good guy doing something heroic. I'm 26 now. A few years back, I worked at a very small IT support and network administration company. When I say small, I mean tiny. At one point, it was just me, my boss, and his sister handling the bookkeeping. Our biggest contract was maintaining the entire tech infrastructure for a local charter school. The job was so large that we basically moved our office into a modular building on the school grounds. Eventually, the business grew enough to hire 2 more employees, and one of them became the central character of this whole mess. Everyone called him AJ, so I'll stick to that. We were all pretty close because in a company that small, you don't really have a choice. We even played Dungeons and Dragons every week. AJ and I got along especially well. He texted me outside of work, and eventually we considered each other friends. AJ had plenty of issues even back then. My boss often scolded him for acting weird around some of the teachers, and for a while he even dated one of them, which caused a lot of awkward situations. Honestly, he went through girlfriends like socks. I knew of at least 6 women he dated in that time, and none of those relationships lasted more than 2 months. A full-on carousel. I didn't treat it as my business back then. I was in a long-distance relationship and didn't pay attention to his patterns. Looking back, his attitude toward women should have been my first warning sign. But at the time, the worst thing I thought about him was that he had a serious drinking problem. Around that time, he started asking me for money. My own financial situation was shaky. I could only work limited hours because of a disability, and I barely managed to cover rent. But AJ would call asking for $50 or $100, swearing he'd pay it back the next week, which almost never happened. He always claimed it was urgent and begged me to help him. I'm not opposed to helping a friend in trouble, but he asked so often that it started putting me in danger of missing rent. I began writing down what he owed me because sometimes I literally couldn't help him unless he returned the money by my rent deadline. And of course, he kept promising he would, and didn't. Eventually, his debt to me hit about $2,000. He also relied on me after losing his license because of multiple DUIs. And when he had a major fight with his father and left home for a couple of months,
I let him stay at my place until he reconciled with his dad. He constantly complained about how his father didn't care whether he lived or died, how he exploded over the smallest things. I felt like I was helping a friend who was going through a rough patch. I had no idea he was lying about half of it, just to squeeze more help out of me. Eventually, we both left that tech job. He was fired after skipping work for a week straight, and I left soon after for mental health reasons. We still kept in touch, mostly because he called me. It wasn't entirely one-sided. Sometimes he did something nice for me, like organizing outdoor cookouts where he paid for everything. And as someone who rarely goes anywhere, I genuinely appreciated that. At this point, you might think this will turn into the kind of story where I end up being the jerk. Don't worry, you'll change your mind soon enough, because this is where things really fall apart. One day, I got a call from the local detention center. AJ had been arrested, and he used his one phone call on me. Turns out he was in jail for domestic violence against his then-girlfriend, who quickly became his ex. According to him, it was mutual, and he just hit harder, wrapped in a long, dramatic explanation. He insisted he wasn't in the wrong. I didn't know what to believe. I had never seen him act aggressive, and I didn't have a great impression of his ex, so I believed his version. He spent a couple of months in jail, got released, and contacted me soon after. At some point, he met one of my closest friends. I'll call her Belle. I'd known her much longer than AJ. We even briefly dated, but when it didn't work out romantically, we became extremely close friends. She's a massive bookworm, struggles with self-esteem, and is genuinely one of the kindest people I know. We broke up only because our libidos were wildly mismatched, but our friendship remained solid. Belle met AJ, and they started dating almost immediately. And unlike his previous relationships, this time I could hear both sides, his and hers. Less than a week into their relationship, Belle called me in a panic, asking if I could pick her up. She was at AJ's house with no car and was scared to stay there. I practically floored the gas pedal driving to get her. She told me AJ got drunk, and what started as playful physical contact suddenly crossed the line and became something she clearly did not consent to.
She told him to stop, and he didn't. It never escalated into full-on sexual assault, but his complete disregard for consent terrified her. And to this day, I still feel guilty for not seeing the warning signs and letting it even get that close. But no one bears more responsibility for that moment than AJ himself. The next day, I confronted AJ hard. His response was to blame Belle, claiming she was lying and manipulating me. I saw through that instantly. I knew Belle too well to believe anything like that. A guy who had just spent a couple of months in jail for domestic violence trying to play innocent against a woman who couldn't lie to save her life? You didn't need to be Sherlock to figure out who was full of it. From that moment on, my friendship with AJ became nothing more than a transaction. I drove him around, he paid for gas, and slowly paid back the money he owed me. Over the next couple of months, I got about $1,000 out of him, half the debt. By then, our relationship was strictly business. I wanted to cut him off completely, but he had no other way to get to work, and he still owed me money. He kept telling me that my kindness inspired him to become a better person, which I now know was just another lie. I genuinely believed I was doing the right thing, but I was nothing more than a pawn. Some commenters later criticized me for staying in contact with him even after he tried to force himself on my friend, and given the context, they're absolutely right. That should have been the breaking point. But the whole house of cards collapsed soon after anyway. One day, I was driving him home from work and casually asked him something. I don't even remember what it was, something normal, harmless. His reaction was bizarrely defensive, which immediately raised a red flag for me. I pressed the question simply because his behavior was suspicious. That set him off like a bomb. He started yelling and insulting me over things that had nothing to do with the question. It escalated into a full-blown argument. When we got to his place, I dropped him off and left.
Not long after I got home, my phone blew up. AJ had been arrested again. Here's what happened. He went inside, got into an argument with his father, and things escalated until AJ punched him in the face. Someone called the police, and AJ was taken away in handcuffs. His father filed for a restraining order to keep him away from the house. When everything came out, I ended up arguing with AJ's dad. We'd never liked each other, and we said plenty of unpleasant things. But as the argument went on, the tension disappeared because we realized we were both angry about things that weren't even true. AJ had been lying to both of us about the other. His father thought I was deliberately covering for AJ and helping him avoid all the measures put in place to deal with his alcoholism. I thought his father was the root of AJ's problems and that I'd been shielding AJ from him. Turns out his dad was actually a calm, reasonable guy. Once we pieced together the truth, we even got along. During that conversation, I learned a lot I had never known. I learned that AJ sometimes got physical with his 20-year-old brother. I learned he lied to me about why he needed money. Most of it was just to buy alcohol behind his father's back. I learned he lied about having ADHD, so I would give him some of my prescription meds to get high. I learned the real story behind his previous fight with his father, in which AJ was entirely at fault. And I learned that people stopped helping him because he drained everyone around him dry and never made any effort to change. Everything I heard matched what I had already started to suspect, but in reality, it was even worse. A few days later, AJ was released on bail. He tried to go home but wasn't allowed, so he ended up in a local homeless shelter. He messaged me again asking for help. That's when I finally told him everything in a long text. He had no explanation, just anger and wild accusations that everyone was conspiring against him. If I summarize my final message to him, it was basically, I'm done pulling you out of the mess you created. You lied to me and used me. Maybe facing the real consequences of your actions will teach you something, or maybe it won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. Don't ever contact me again, not even to pay back the rest of the money. His last response was a string of curses. Then his number was disconnected. His father had stopped paying for it. Over the years, I've occasionally run into AJ's dad. Neither of us has heard from AJ since. I work delivery for DoorDash now, and he works at a local pizza chain, so sometimes our jobs overlap. The last I heard, AJ is living on the streets in a big city not far from here. I honestly hope he's learning one crucial lesson. Don't mistreat the people who are trying to help you. Eventually, they stop.
I threw out my pregnant sister-in-law's food. My brother and his wife, Laura, who's 7 months pregnant, have been staying with us for about a week while he interviews for a job in our city. My kids adore having their aunt and uncle around, and everything had been going smoothly. Yesterday, Laura went grocery shopping and came back with several bags. I thanked her, but told her it really wasn't necessary. Our kitchen is already stocked, and their company is more than enough. She said she wanted to buy food herself, and most of the items were things she was seriously craving. As I helped her unpack, I noticed almost everything contained peanuts. Cookies, crackers, peanut butter, even some kind of peanut-filled cake. My stomach dropped, because she knows my 8-year-old son has a severe peanut allergy. We don't keep anything with peanuts in the house. When he was younger, we had a medical emergency that nearly cost his life. Ever since then, peanuts are a hard no. I tried not to be rude, but I told her I wasn't comfortable having that stuff in my home. Laura insisted she'd be careful. She wouldn't eat it around him or the other kids. She'd clean up afterward, she promised. She said her pregnancy cravings were intense and she really needed these snacks. Look, I have 4 kids. I know pregnancy cravings can be weird. I personally never had any that extreme, but every woman is different. I explained everything to my son and told him not to touch her snacks or be near her when she ate them. Fine. Problem solved. Or so I thought. This morning, I went downstairs early to make breakfast. I opened the fridge and found strawberries covered in peanut butter sitting right on the shelf with no container. Next to them, an open jar of peanut butter with the lid barely hanging on. and a plate of cold, soggy peanut butter sandwiches because apparently she likes them that way. I was furious. I've read enough about airborne allergens to know this was not safe. I grabbed a trash bag and started dumping everything inside. Her food, our food, all of it. I didn't care. I planned to take the bag straight to a shelter and explain why I couldn't keep it. Laura walked in while I was still fuming and asked what I was doing. I didn't hide my anger. She immediately got defensive, saying I had no right to throw away her food, that her baby needed it, and that I was being cruel to a pregnant woman. I told her point blank that I didn't care. If she couldn't respect my rules or my child's safety, then her cravings were not my problem. My kid could die. She stormed upstairs, packed her things, came back down, grabbed the bag of food, and left in tears. My brother called about half an hour later during a break in his interview. He was upset with both of us, said everyone was overreacting and that our son was still perfectly fine. When my husband came home, I told him everything, and he immediately took my side. So, was I wrong? Before we move on to the update, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Honestly, I can understand both sides here. If I were the pregnant woman, I'd probably feel humiliated and confused too. Someone throwing away all the groceries I bought, including my own food, because of a few peanut butter snacks? I'd be annoyed. But I also fully understand the mom. You simply cannot risk your child's life just to satisfy someone else's cravings. The unborn baby doesn't need peanut butter. It's a craving, not a medical necessity. Looking at the situation logically, the mom was right to prioritize her son's safety. Severe allergies are no joke, and if airborne peanut particles are even a small possibility, she had to act. The pregnant woman showed a shocking level of carelessness. So what do you think? Whose side are you on? Update 1. As many commenters predicted, Laura immediately ran to my family to complain. To her credit, she didn't twist the story. She told it exactly as it happened. And my mother was furious. She called me out of breath like she'd sprinted a mile, right after giving Laura a long lecture and making sure my son was okay. I can only imagine what she said to her. Even my stepdad gave Laura one of his signature disapproving glares, the kind that could make a grown adult rethink their entire life. My brother came by later that evening to pick up his things. For some reason, Laura had only packed hers. He apologized for what happened and said he'd talk to her once she calmed down. According to him, she'd been crying non-stop ever since leaving my mom's place and now felt completely unwanted in our family. And of course, he blamed me for that. My husband stepped in and told him enough was enough, that Laura's feelings didn't outweigh what we had gone through and that she needed to stop acting like the victim. He pointed out that I'd been scrubbing the house from top to bottom for hours because of her stunt. Yes, I panicked a little and launched into a full deep clean, especially in the kitchen. My brother stormed out, saying we were impossible to reason with because we're both too stubborn. Now that I've calmed down, I do feel bad that Laura is hurt and feels unwelcome. That was never my intention. I'm actually considering apologizing, not for what I did, because I still believe I was right, but for how I reacted. I should never have agreed to let peanut products into the house in the first place, and I definitely could have handled the fridge situation more calmly.
Update 2. A lot of people asked for a continuation, so here it is. After my mom finished tearing into Laura and my brother yelled at me and my husband, I followed the advice many of you gave me and sent them both a long message. It came out messy and emotional, but I wrote about everything: how upsetting the situation was, how much their attitude hurt us, and that we were stepping back and limiting contact until we were ready to talk again. I sent the message the day after he grabbed his luggage and left. My brother left it on read without opening it, so I figured that was the end. But a couple days later, Laura called me. I hesitated, but curiosity won. At first she tried making small talk, but when she realized I wasn't in the mood, she got to the point. She apologized. She said she had no excuse other than blaming hormones, and admitted she'd acted horribly. We ended up talking for a long time,
And by the end of the conversation, I actually felt relieved, like maybe we could move past this. She also told me she still wanted us to come to her birthday. The celebration wouldn't be at a restaurant anymore. They spent more than expected on the hotel, just like everyone predicted, so she'd be hosting it at their house. I told her I'd discuss it with my husband. My brother later sent a message too, apologizing and saying he'd only been trying to defend her. My husband still felt it was too soon to reconcile, but he left the final decision to me. And honestly, I believed her apology. She had never behaved like that before, and she genuinely sounded embarrassed and remorseful. My sister, whom Laura also apologized to after my sister absolutely tore into her, and my parents were invited as well. But all the kids wanted to have a cousin sleepover instead of coming with us. After talking to my sister, we agreed that's what we'd do. Our usual babysitters are 16-year-old twin girls who live next door with their single mom. They're great, responsible, sweet, and have been helping us with the kids for over a year now, whenever my husband and I go on date nights. That matters for context. Since we were adding my sister's 2 kids to the group, I asked their mom if she could help the twins that evening. She agreed. So I called Laura and told her Richard and I would attend. When we arrived at their house, Laura met us at the door. We handed her the gift and stepped inside, but she looked a bit confused that the kids weren't with us. I reminded her that it was supposed to be an adults-only evening. The same thing happened when my sister and her husband showed up. Dinner was awkward. No matter how hard we tried to ease the tension, the conversation felt stiff. Still, I thought it was progress. Then Laura asked again why the kids hadn't come. She said she'd even cooked a special dish just for them. I hadn't mentioned the kids when confirming we'd attend, so I felt guilty, apologized, and thanked her for the thought. My sister jumped in and mentioned that the kids were having a cousin sleepover tonight, and she couldn't wait until our future nephew was old enough to join them. Laura smiled and said, "Oh, I'm sure he'll be best friends with his cousins, my kids and your stepkids." That irritated me instantly. In our family, nobody uses words like step or half about the kids, but I held my tongue for the sake of peace. My sister technically is my stepsister. I mentioned my stepdad in my first post. I usually just call him by his name, but he's been a father figure since I was 10. My sister shot Laura an offended look, and my brother nudged his wife quietly with a face that clearly said, "What are you doing?" We ate in tense silence for a few minutes, barely keeping conversation alive, until Laura asked again about the kids, specifically who was watching them if all 4 parents were sitting at the table. I told her that our neighbors, the mom and the twin daughters, were babysitting tonight. Laura burst out laughing and joked that those girls and their mother must be so incompetent that all 3 of them could barely handle my kids. For context, I have 4 children. Maybe I'm biased, but they're well behaved, just a little too energetic sometimes for me, and I'm the one who gave birth to them. Add my sister's 2 kids on top of that, and it becomes too much for a pair of 16-year-old girls, even for just a couple of hours. We left at 7 p.m. and planned to be back by 11. It had nothing to do with the girls or their mom being bad babysitters. They're wonderful people, and my children adore them. Before I even opened my mouth, my own mother cut in. With a perfect smile, she said, "How sweet of you, Laura, to volunteer your expertise and babysit next time." Laura shut up. Dinner became even tenser after that. When we finished eating, Laura brought out dessert and my brother pulled a cake from the fridge. That's when I completely lost it. I stepped into the bathroom, and when I came back, I saw my husband holding my purse and practically dragging me out of the house. He looked furious. I was confused. Yes, dinner had been a disaster, but I still wanted to say goodbye and come up with a polite excuse. When he tried to physically push me outside, I knew something was very wrong. I pulled away from him and rushed back to the dining room. On the dessert table, the one Laura had proudly set, were peanut butter cupcakes, peanut butter pie, peanut butter cookies, peanut butter brownies, and the crown jewel, a peanut butter cake my brother had just carried in, staring at it in horror. Laura grinned and loudly announced to everyone, It's my birthday. At least today I get to indulge myself. Help yourselves before she throws this out, too.
For a moment, I honestly thought my sister was going to attack her, and I can't say I was far from doing the same. All I could think about was how convinced Laura must be that my children would show up, and how she clearly planned this on purpose. I still felt guilty for allowing peanut products in that house the last time, and if my cousins hadn't been staying the night, my son could have been in deadly danger again. I snapped. Before I even realized what I was doing, I grabbed Laura by the head, turned her toward my brother, who looked too stunned to move, and shoved her face straight into the cake. I held her down while she flailed and said, "I hope you choke on your little indulgences," before letting go. Honestly, a part of me wanted to launch the pie at her as well, but I had already embarrassed myself enough. I told my brother I was done. With him, with his wife, with all of it. And if either of them tried contacting me or my family again, I'd file for a restraining order. My husband finally managed to get me out of the house. My sister followed with her husband while our parents stayed behind. I heard Laura screaming profanity after us, but my stepdad raised his voice, something he almost never does, and she went silent immediately. People joked in the comments of my first post about his death stare, but trust me, the man is usually calm as a stone. If he shows emotion, things have seriously gone off the rails. When we were kids, one frown from him was enough to make us understand we were in trouble. I haven't asked my mom what happened after. I can't handle another blow connected to my brother and his choices. I know this isn't the update anyone expected, but I'm done with both of them. My brother had to know. All of this happened under his roof. It breaks my heart that I won't see my nephew anymore, that my kids won't meet the cousin they were excited about, but better to grieve that than to bury my son. Don't spare me harsh words. I'm 32. I shouldn't have been so naive. And yes, I know my reaction was wrong. I'm already talking to my therapist, trying to deal with the guilt. Please don't judge too hard. I'm still shaken. I'm also considering family therapy for my kids to help them process losing an uncle and aunt who used to be a big part of their lives. And now, we move on to the next story. Tell me in the comments, was the narrator right in the end or not? Maybe she shouldn't have snapped so badly that she shoved her sister-in-law's face into a cake. But honestly, a part of me just wants to say, well done. That was pretty much the ultimate payback she could have delivered.
Almost 7 years ago, my family cut me off completely and threw me out of the house. At the time, I was only 22, still working my first job, not financially stable enough to rent on my own. It all happened so suddenly that I had no time to prepare, emotionally or financially. The reason for all of it was my sister, Hannah. Hannah and I were never especially close. She was quite a bit older than me. By the time she was 27, she married her boyfriend, Pete. They stayed married for about 3 years before she filed for divorce, claiming Pete had been cheating on her with one of my friends. Back then, I was still living with my parents after college, saving money before moving out. Everything at home was fine until Hannah came back one night in tears, declaring she'd discovered Pete's betrayal. According to her, he had been having an affair for 6 months, and somehow it was my fault. The reason? I had introduced Pete to my friend Emily. She had been struggling to gain weight, and since Pete was a certified nutritionist, he offered to help her out. That was it. Hannah twisted that into a story that Emily was the woman Pete cheated with. I was stunned. Emily and I weren't super close, but I knew her well enough to believe she would never get involved with a married man. And Pete, if anything, he always seemed hopelessly devoted to Hannah. He talked about her constantly, and not once in those 3 years did I see anything suspicious. But none of my doubts mattered. My parents instantly sided with Hannah. They didn't ask for evidence, didn't question anything. They just took her word for it. I can't blame them for choosing their daughter over their son-in-law. But what broke me was how quickly they turned on me. Hannah stormed into the house one day, hysterical, and convinced them that I was to blame for ruining her marriage, simply because I had introduced Pete to Emily. Within minutes, they told me to pack my things and leave. When I begged them to listen, they said if I didn't go on my own, they'd throw me out. Just like that, I lost my home and my family in the same day. I still remember sitting on the curb outside with my bags, crying for an hour before finally calling a friend to let me crash at his place. I tried reaching out to my parents in the days that followed. Calls, texts, visits, nothing worked. They blocked my number. The one time I went to the house, my mom threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. That's when it hit me. They truly believed I was responsible. Looking back, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Hannah was always the favorite. I was the unexpected second child, the one who got leftovers while she got the spotlight. As kids, it didn't matter much to me, but I never thought that favoritism would destroy my place in the family entirely. Pete blocked me too. No explanation, no chance to defend myself. And Hannah moved back in with my parents, making it impossible for me to even try talking things out. The only person left who might know the truth was Emily. We weren't close, but I reached out anyway. And when I explained what Hannah had accused me of, she was horrified. She swore nothing ever happened between her and Pete, that their interactions had been strictly professional. To prove it, she even told me about her long-term boyfriend. They were already talking about marriage. She showed me photos of the two of them together. Her explanation made infinitely more sense than anything Hannah had said. Deep down, I already knew Hannah had lied, probably to cover the real reason for the divorce. But without any proof, I was powerless. My family had made up their minds, and I was left alone. Back then, all I wanted was to reconnect with my family. Despite everything they had done to me, I still missed them terribly. But as time passed, I had no choice but to adapt. I found an apartment, poured myself into work, and tried to build a life. Bills had to be paid, and keeping myself busy was the only way I knew how to cope. It wasn't easy. The pain was overwhelming. But slowly, I taught myself to move forward, with or without their support. Years went by, and life began to change for the better. I moved out of that tiny apartment into something much nicer, built a stable career, and just last week, I proposed to the woman I've been dating for 2 years. She said yes. But the real turning point came shortly after my engagement. A few days after my fiancée, Lisa, posted our engagement photos on Instagram and cross-shared them to Facebook, I got an email. Not just any email, but the email that finally explained everything that had happened years ago, complete with proof. It turned out that Lisa, who works as a doctor, had once met Pete, my former brother-in-law, at a medical seminar. They had stayed loosely connected on Facebook. That's how he stumbled across our engagement post. For the first time in years, I was glad the world was so small. Instead of messaging me directly, Pete chose to send an anonymous email. Later, he explained it was because he didn't want to seem awkward. After all, years had passed since the divorce, and he had no desire to look like someone still clinging to the past. He also admitted that since he'd blocked me back then, it felt strange to just pop back up in my life. But what mattered was the content. The email laid out the full truth behind the divorce, and it completely shattered the story Hannah had built. It was Hannah who had been unfaithful, not Pete. And worse, she had cheated with my friend Frank. At the time, Frank worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. Never in a million years would I have suspected anything between them. They'd been so careful to hide it. But Pete eventually found out. When confronted, Hannah tried to twist the situation, telling Pete that it was my fault. She claimed I had introduced her to Frank, even encouraging their connection by mentioning his interest in music since she was a decent singer herself. From there, she said, things just happened. To cover her tracks, she even insisted I had helped them hide the affair all along, which was, of course, a blatant lie. Pete admitted he was furious when he found out. Instead of thinking clearly, he blocked everyone in my family, including me. Looking back, he knows it was the wrong move, but at the time, anger clouded everything.
The email itself included screenshots of conversations between Hannah and Frank. Messages where they openly confessed their love, joked about how easy it was to fool Pete, and arranged secret meetups. Hannah had even signed off using her rarely mentioned middle name, something only a few people knew. There was no denying it. Reading those messages was surreal. For the first time in years, I had undeniable proof. Hannah had lied about everything. I eventually confronted Pete in person after realizing he was in Lisa's Facebook friends list. He admitted that Emily, my friend who had originally been accused, had told him her side years ago. He just never told me because he didn't want to stir things up again. He regretted it now, because if he had spoken up earlier, I could have cleared my name long ago. Still, he was willing to help me now. Pete and I agreed that Hannah's lies had destroyed enough lives, and neither of us wanted her manipulations to stand unchallenged any longer. The truth was clear. Hannah had weaponized her family's trust to protect herself, even if it meant sacrificing me. She dragged my name through the mud, convinced my parents to disown me, all to keep her own reputation intact while she pursued her affair. And for the first time in years, I had the evidence to finally set the record straight. I'm certain my sister never once tried to tell our parents the truth. Instead, she kept feeding them lies during the divorce, and they swallowed every word without hesitation. She knew that if our parents ever discovered she was the one who cheated, she'd be in serious trouble, and she just couldn't allow that. Well, now the truth is finally out, and I'm going to use it to destroy her life the same way she destroyed mine all those years ago. I wasn't sure if my parents were still living in the same house, since I hadn't seen them in 7 years, but an old neighbor confirmed they never moved. Even better, Hannah still lived there. That didn't surprise me at all. She was always lazy and hated responsibility. Living off aging parents while they did everything for her was exactly her style. 2 days ago, Pete and I showed up unannounced. My mom opened the door, and we pushed our way inside before she could react. My dad and Hannah were sitting in the living room. The happy family reunited, but only for a moment. Their faces twisted as soon as they saw us. My dad immediately started shouting, threatening to call the police if we didn't leave. I told him he could do whatever he wanted, but only after reading the documents we brought. My parents looked confused, while Hannah turned pale and bolted to her room. I figured she was trying to avoid the inevitable, but there was no escaping it. Pete pulled out the divorce papers and screenshots of Hannah's messages with Frank, while I explained the real story. Pete also revealed how Hannah had been forced to give up our grandmother's diamond heirloom ring to settle the divorce, since her teacher salary couldn't cover the payout. My parents were stunned. We sat there watching as the drama unfolded. My dad demanded answers from Hannah, but when she tried lying yet again, even with the evidence right in front of her, he'd had enough. He packed her belongings, shoved them into a bag, and kicked her out of the house on the spot. I didn't need to be told twice. Pete and I walked out together, leaving Hannah begging our parents to let her back in, exactly the way I had once begged them years ago. It was the sweetest revenge. I felt nothing but satisfaction. A couple days later, Hannah showed up at my place, demanding I fix things with our parents. I don't even know how she found my address, but I told her point blank that I owed her nothing. She ruined my life, and I simply returned the favor. We were even now. Apparently, she has no pride left, because the moment I said that, she broke down sobbing, calling me a monster. I honestly didn't care. I put on my headphones, turned up the music, and let Lisa keep working peacefully in her office. Eventually she left, but not before scrawling a message on my door with a marker reminding me that I'm a vengeful monster. To be honest, I don't feel bad about what I did. I don't think I'm the villain here,
I didn't lie or scheme like she did. I just exposed the truth. So, am I really the bad guy for ruining my sister's life and getting her kicked out of our parents' home 7 years after she blamed me for her divorce? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Update 1. Hannah didn't stop bothering me. Even after a week, she kept calling nonstop, 14 times in a day. I finally threatened to involve the police, and that made her back off, at least for now. I have no idea how she keeps getting my number after I block her, but apparently she has her friends add me into group calls from different numbers. She's tried guilt-tripping me, saying her teacher salary isn't enough to live on. But I know that's not the real issue. What she really hates is finally having to pay rent, utilities, and groceries herself. And honestly, that's not my problem. As for my parents, they're not much better. They found me on Facebook after seeing Lisa's engagement post. Now they're suddenly interested in being part of my life again. They even hinted that they expect to be invited to my wedding. They still haven't apologized, but somehow think they deserve to show up on one of the most important days of my life. Lisa and I laughed reading their messages because they were so delusional it almost seemed like a bad joke. But in truth, the whole thing is more sad than funny.
Update 2. Hannah showed up at my house again, even after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was getting ready to leave for work, but she stopped me by flopping onto the hood of my car, refusing to move until I spoke with her. It was incredibly annoying, and this time I actually called the police. They took her away while she screamed and cried, trying to paint me as the bad guy. Unfortunately for her, nobody bought it. It took some time to file the official report against her, but as soon as I did, I rushed to work so this incident wouldn't ruin my day. I figured my parents would bail her out since she's their favorite, and I was right. They sent her home and then followed up with a long message telling me I had been too harsh and unfair to them over a mistake they supposedly made almost 10 years ago. It was laughable. Nothing my sister and parents did to me back then could ever be called merciful or fair. No mercy stopped them from literally throwing me out of the house with nowhere to go. So now, I see no reason to offer forgiveness or kindness. I messaged my parents saying that after all these years, they had lost any right to tell me what I can or cannot do, and that they should stop deluding themselves. I haven't blocked them yet, had to check the message first, but I will soon. Hopefully then, I can finally cut that whole family out of my life for good. Update 3. I just got home from work, checked my socials, and saw that my parents sent me another long message. Lisa and I read it together, and I swear it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. These poor people don't realize that nothing they say or do now can hurt me. I just laughed at how pathetic they are. They still think we're a family, and announced they'd taken Hannah back, claiming both of their children deserve a second chance, as if I was ever in the wrong. They expected Lisa and me to visit them for dinner before my wedding to civilly resolve our differences. Too bold of them to assume I'd ever want them anywhere near my wedding. We laughed at their absurd message, and I responded that I had zero interest in any invitations from them. I'm perfectly happy living my life without them, just like I have for the last 7 years. They made it clear long ago that I'm better off without them. I'm grateful it took me so long to realize that. I no longer need them or their so-called forgiveness. They can continue playing happy family with Hannah all they want. I don't care. After sending that last message, I blocked them permanently. That's it. I'm done. I'm sure they'll try to contact me again somehow, but it doesn't matter. Lisa is the only family I need, and I'm happier than I've ever been with just her. My parents and sister never could see past their own noses, and I doubt they ever will. Next time they try to reach out, they'll be talking to my lawyer.
My ex-wife cheated on me, then tried to become a copy of my new girlfriend after her lover cheated on her. My ex-wife, she's 48 and I'm 47, left me for a man who was actually married to her best friend from high school. Yeah, great friend. We've been married for 20 years, and I thought we had 2 kids together. Recently, I found out the younger one isn't biologically mine. She's his. My ex knew it from the start and kept it secret all these years. My name is still on the birth certificate though, and I plan to fight for custody because that little girl is my daughter, not by blood, but by everything else that matters. Apparently, their affair had been going on for a long time. Finding out felt like being punched in the gut. When I asked her to choose him or me, she said him. Why? Because, in her words, he can go for a second round right after sex. That was it. That was her reason. She didn't care that I worked 2 jobs to pay for her college, that I gave up my dream of becoming a musician so she could stay home with the kids. Kids she was cheating on me around. She and the kids were my entire world, but she was never an easy woman to live with. She's bipolar, and life with her was a constant storm of anger and emotional abuse. I used to tell myself she couldn't control it, but later I learned from her own friends that sometimes she hit me simply because she felt like it. My kids saw it all, her screaming, her hitting me, and I just stood there, never fighting back. I hated that they had to witness that. Once, near the end, she snapped because I didn't take the trash out the moment I came home. She grabbed me by the throat and started choking me, right in front of our son. I managed to say, "He's never going to forget this." That's when she finally let go. Looking back, I should have left years earlier, but I stayed. For the kids. I thought I was protecting them. When the truth finally came out, she sat across from her best friend, the wife of the man she'd been sleeping with, and said, "Yes, it's true. No, I'm not sorry." Then she just got up and walked away. She moved out, took the kids, and moved in with him, in an apartment just down the street. Even then, I hoped she'd realize that the grass isn't greener. After all, this guy had cheated on his wife before, several times, and she knew that. I waited that entire first year thinking she'd come back. She even kept a spare key to our place, and I thought maybe she held on to it because she knew she'd return one day. But by the end of that year, things got ugly. Her new boyfriend would show up at the bus stop when I dropped off the kids for school, saying, "I came to say goodbye to my daughter, not yours, mine." I told him, "Then why were you fine letting her raise her for the past 5 years? Why did you let her take my last name? Why was I there for her birth while you were nowhere around?" He nearly hit me. That same night, they both came to my place drunk because he wanted to fight it out. My ex made it public, bragging all over Facebook about her new man. Our mutual friend saw it and immediately reached out to me and his wife. Of course, I took screenshots. She didn't seem to care that she was ruining her image before the divorce was even finalized. But honestly, why would she? By then, I had already confronted her with the paternity test results. For a while, I was destroying myself mentally, wondering what I could have done differently. She accused me of not being there, but how could I be when I was working 2 jobs to just keep us afloat? I'd come home exhausted, the house a mess, walls covered in crayon drawings, blinds ripped down, and she'd still scream at me for not taking the trash out. 16 hours of work a day, and that was her biggest problem. Eventually, I started to believe maybe it really was my fault, that I somehow caused it all. It took time, and my brother, to pull me out of that mindset. He forced me to join his band, said it helped me get my life back. I resisted, but he insisted, and it changed everything. I met some amazing people, started playing again, and eventually began dating a woman. 45, kind, warm, the complete opposite of my ex. For the first time in decades, I was in a relationship where no one yelled at me or threw things at my head. But my ex still had keys to our old place. She'd occasionally stop by to drop off things for the kids. One day, she walked in and found my new girlfriend there. It didn't go well. That evening, she called, furious, demanding to know who the woman was and why she was in our house. I told her calmly, "My personal life stopped being your business the day you left." That didn't sit well with her. Over the past few months, she's gone completely off the rails because of my new relationship. She tried to friend request my girlfriend on Facebook, demanding she accepted so she could see who was around her kids. When my girlfriend refused, she called screaming that I needed to make her accept. My girlfriend took the phone and said, "I don't owe you access to my private life. If it's about the kids, we'll handle it through messages or calls." After that, things got weird. Suddenly, my girlfriend started getting random friend requests from people who were all friends with my ex.
Then, my ex began showing up at my house on weekends while I was at work, basically spying. One time, I was on the phone with my girlfriend when she whispered, "Your ex just walked in." When she asked what my ex wanted, the woman said she was just checking how much milk was in the fridge for the kids. My girlfriend told her we had everything under control, and she left. When I got home, I demanded she return the keys since she no longer lived there. She gave me a fake apology, then stole our son's keys to make another copy. Once our lease ended, my girlfriend suggested we move in together, mostly to get away from my ex's insanity. My ex tried to sabotage even that. She called the cops, claiming I was taking her stuff. When the officers asked her to name a single thing that belonged to her, she couldn't. Now, the kids stay with us every other weekend. They've told me their mom doesn't let them talk about what we do together. She doesn't want to hear it. But lately, she's been prying again, asking questions about our time. Honestly, it's just jealousy. We live by the coast, and when the kids are with us, we take walks by the ocean, play games, go to the aquarium. If they come home with prizes, she throws them away. And lately, I've noticed something strange. Whenever she drops the kids off, she looks almost exactly like my girlfriend. Same haircut, same color, same style. It's honestly disturbing.
Everything we do with the kids, she tries to copy the following week. If we go to the beach, she takes them there too. If we visit the zoo, she's suddenly going to the zoo as well. She finds out what we had for dinner, cooks the same thing, and even makes the kids tell her whose food they liked better. Last week, my son told me he wanted to live with us. He said, "Mom's lost her mind." You can bet I'll be using that in court. And just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, she started sending me explicit photos out of nowhere. My girlfriend was sitting next to me when the pictures came through. I immediately told her I hadn't asked for them, that my ex and I never talked like that, and even offered to let her check my phone. She laughed, looked at the photos, and jokingly asked for my ex's number, saying she'd send some of her own just to show her how it's actually done. I called my ex right away and asked what the hell she was thinking. I told her my girlfriend saw everything and was furious. She claimed she'd sent them to the wrong person. Then my girlfriend chimed in, "Your name is the first alphabetically in his contacts, and your boyfriend's is at the very end. So who exactly were you trying to send them to?" The ex hung up immediately. Honestly, I have no idea what kind of game she's playing anymore. It's pure insanity. And just to clarify, my girlfriend didn't send her anything back. It was just a joke. She said she'd show her how it's done because those photos were laughably bad. Mirror selfies, no shirt, duck lips. My girlfriend just rolled her eyes at the lack of imagination. I don't live in the old apartment anymore. After I took back the keys, she used our son's to make herself a copy and kept breaking in. So I moved in with my girlfriend. The ex doesn't have access now. The kids don't have keys either for that exact reason. I'm currently fighting for custody. It's not easy since I'm not my daughter's biological father, but my name's on the birth certificate, which gives me legal rights. The ex has been prescribed medication, but I doubt she takes it. Whenever the kids come over, I check for bruises just to make sure no one's hurting them. Apparently, she even hit her boyfriend once, and he punched a hole in the wall, warning her that if she tried that again, he'd fight back. Comment. From what you've described, your ex sounds completely unstable, maybe even dangerous. You should talk to a lawyer and see about getting a restraining order. Update 1. Last weekend was my daughter's 6th birthday. It wasn't my scheduled time with the kids, but to my surprise, my ex asked if I wanted to have them for her birthday. Of course I said yes, and she even let me keep them for 2 extra days. I figured she and her boyfriend probably had plans and just wanted some kid-free time. But here's the weird part. This was the first time her boyfriend could have celebrated his own biological daughter's birthday, and instead, he just handed her off to me and my girlfriend. Tell me that's not messed up. Comment. He's a disgusting coward, the kind of man who got another man's wife pregnant. Don't expect him to act like a responsible adult. Keep a record of his neglect. It might help in court.
poor little girl stuck between terrible adults. Update 2. Looks like karma finally caught up to my ex. On Saturday night, I got a furious text from her saying I hope I was happy because I won. I know I shouldn't have replied, but I asked what she was even talking about. She sent a bunch of nonsense and then told me to go ahead and gloat, said I'd probably enjoy it even more since it's my fault something bad happened to her. I asked what exactly she meant, but instead of explaining, she went on a drunken rant about how all men are pigs and can't be trusted. That's when it hit me. She was drunk again, and her boyfriend had cheated on her. I didn't say a word. You can't reason with her when she's like that. I just read the messages, realizing she finally got what she deserved. She left me for my married friend, the same guy who'd already cheated on his wife multiple times. She was affair number 3. When I reminded her that the day she left, she said, "I know what I'm getting into." Well, turns out she didn't. She thought she'd be the one who'd change him. Guess not. When she ran out of insults for me, she turned her attention to my girlfriend, said I was ugly as hell and that I could have any woman, but chose a monster to replace her. My girlfriend is gorgeous, inside and out, and her ex clearly can't stand it. She's been obsessed, copying her looks, stalking her online, trying to provoke jealousy. Then she said something even more ridiculous, claimed I didn't actually love my girlfriend because it's impossible to fall in love with the first woman you sleep with after losing me. We'd been separated for a year before I even met my girlfriend, and it took me a long time to trust again. That trust, she earned it. Then my ex accused me of being with my girlfriend only because I lost my old apartment and was mooching off of her for a place to stay. She said, "You're just pretending to love her because you're homeless." For the record, I had my own place, across the street from my ex. She intentionally rented nearby so I'd have to see her new boyfriend every day. When my lease ended, I moved in with my girlfriend and found work near her place. It was obvious she was trying to start a fight, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. And just when I thought her insults couldn't get dumber, she said, "I'm sorry I wasn't enough for you." God, I wanted to scream. You left me. Did she forget who walked out and replaced who? She dumped me for a married man who cheats constantly. What a prize. Then she went back to insulting my girlfriend, saying we both knew deep down I still wanted her and that my girlfriend couldn't compare. That's when I'd had enough. I told her to contact me when she sobered up and turned off my phone. A few hours later, my girlfriend came home and asked what happened. I handed her my phone and said, "Read it for yourself." She read the whole thing, laughed, gave it back, and said, "Looks like he cheated on her." I nodded, and she was right. She told me my ex's narcissism explodes when she's drunk, and that she's just angry she can't come over and sleep with me out of revenge. Haven't heard from my ex since.
I guess, like always, the next day she reread all her messages, realized what she'd done, and felt like an idiot. Still, I'm sure she's back with him again. She just can't stand being alone. I'm so glad your new girlfriend just laughed it off. She sounds amazing. Definitely a huge upgrade from your ex. Yeah, my girlfriend's incredibly calm and grounded. It's strange, but refreshing. I got so used to my ex's constant explosions that this peaceful vibe still throws me off sometimes. You reap what you sow, man. Karma really knows when to show up. Just keep living your life. Looks like revenge really is a dish best served cold. Your ex sounds either completely toxic or straight up unhinged. You think that was a manic episode? I just hope the kids are safe. Can you get full custody? Yeah, I'm already fighting for custody. And I saved all those messages. Another reason why I didn't snap at her. My ex got cheated on by the very same guy she left me for. No surprise there. 3 days later, they were back together again. She literally has nowhere else to go. Now, she's stuck with him. Since then, apart from signing some divorce papers and the occasional text about the kids, I haven't heard a thing from her. And honestly, thank God for that. Still, I'm sure she's back with him again. She just can't stand being alone. This Halloween, my brother's band got invited to play at a friend's annual event. They've been performing there for years. It's sort of a tradition now. My ex used to come with me before everything blew up, but last year she skipped it. That was around the time I found out she'd been sleeping with her best friend's husband and that my 6-year-old daughter was actually his child. This year, no one invited her, but she showed up anyway with the same guy she cheated on me with. I was furious. The event is strictly 18 plus, and she knew that perfectly well. I'm convinced she brought the kids just to get me kicked out. Security told her she couldn't bring children inside, but she stood there making a scene. Eventually, security came to me and asked if I could escort them out, and she immediately started yelling that I care more about some stupid party than my own kids. My friend, the event organizer, came over and said she could stay for 2 songs. Then she'd have to leave or he'd call the cops. I told him not to give in to her drama, but he said he was only doing it for the kids' sake. The night turned into a disaster. I was on stage most of the time, so I couldn't see what was happening in the crowd, but I heard bits and pieces between sets. Turns out my ex tried to start something with my girlfriend, and it did not end well for her. My girlfriend shut her down instantly and told her to stop using the kids as weapons. A lot of people saw it happen. When I finally got off stage, multiple people came up to me to explain what had gone down. My ex was glaring at my girlfriend from across the room, full of rage. And then, my daughter finished it off. She yelled across the whole hall, "I have 2 dads, my dad and mommy's boyfriend, who's my real dad." The room went silent. My ex turned beet red, hissed, "Thanks for embarrassing me," and stormed out. But my son refused to leave with her. He clung to me, crying, begging to stay. Her boyfriend eventually walked up to my girlfriend and asked if the boy could stay with us. She agreed, and even arranged with my friend to let him hang around until the end of the event. Later, we took him home with us. That entire night was pure hell. I must have apologized 1,000 times to my friend, my girlfriend, even my son, for dragging them into that chaos. I kept messing up songs during the set because my eyes were constantly scanning the crowd, terrified that another fight would break out. I didn't even know she had left the venue without her son until after our performance was over. When I took him home the next evening, she made sure to avoid seeing me. Her boyfriend came out instead, said she knew I'd be there and didn't want to talk about what happened. Then he apologized for everything and started venting about how she behaves. I cut him off, told him I'm not interested in discussing her anymore. Later that night, my son called me saying they were fighting again, screaming so loud the walls were shaking. Apparently, her boyfriend had finally snapped. He told her she still wasn't over me and accused her of being obsessed with my life. According to my son, he yelled something like, "What pisses you off more? That he's moved on and you can't crawl back to him? Or that if you hadn't cheated with me, he probably would have left you for his current girlfriend anyway?" That's what started it all. I could hear them yelling in the background. I asked my son if I needed to come get him, but he said no. I stayed on the phone until things finally quieted down. So yeah, that's where things stand right now. The divorce is still not finalized, but I've moved on. I'm done mourning what I lost. I just want to get my kids out of that mess. And yes, I'm still fighting for custody. She's furious because she can't come back. If you ever hear them screaming like that again while you're on the phone with your son, call 911. Get those kids out immediately. Child Protective Services will at least remove them for the night, and one of those 2 will probably face domestic violence charges. She's getting exactly what she deserves. Cheaters are never truly happy. They live in the fog of their own lies, and when it becomes real life, all the ugliness surfaces. Your ex knows he cheated before and will likely do it again, but she's stuck with him now. She's drowning in the consequences of her own choices. Stay strong and keep making your girlfriend happy. She sounds amazing. He was married when she slept with my wife and at least 2 other women that I know of, and she knew about it. When I confronted her on the day she left, she said, "I know what I'm getting into." She really thought he'd change for her. Yeah, sure. And that's pretty much it. What do you all think? Do you believe cheaters are just lost causes, or can people actually change if the circumstances are right? Personally, I think there are 2 types. those who cheat because they need the thrill, and those who cheat because they're miserable and stuck in the wrong situation. The first type will always cheat. The second might stop once they finally find someone who fulfills them. Which one's more common? Hard to say, but I'm pretty sure it's the first.
My grandparents gave me a trip to Rome, but my parents forced me to hand it over to my golden child sister. She ended up crashing on the way to the airport, so I took my ticket back and went anyway. Hi, I'm 18, and for my birthday, my grandparents on my dad's side gifted me a plane ticket to Rome plus a check for travel expenses. I was beyond excited, but the very next day, my parents started pressuring me to be selfless and give the trip to my older sister, June. She's 21 and the golden child of the family, if that wasn't already obvious. Their excuse? June is studying architecture, and seeing Rome in person would be an amazing opportunity for her resume and her language skills. I pointed out that I'm going into literature, and Rome would be just as valuable for me, but they didn't care. The kicker? June had already been given the same choice at 18. Grandparents offered her a trip abroad, but she turned it down and asked for cash instead. My turn finally came, and suddenly I'm not allowed to enjoy it. For weeks, the arguments dragged on. My parents guilt-tripped me, listing every sacrifice they've made for me, calling it a small favor to give up this trip. I resisted at first, until one day they slipped up and said they didn't want the trip wasted on me. That broke me. Basically, if I went, it was worthless, but if June went, it mattered. They tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Eventually, I gave in and said, fine, whatever. I figured there was no way the airline would even allow them to change the ticket, so I still had my check at least. But somehow, they pulled strings. On the day of the flight, June showed up with my boarding pass and headed to the airport instead. And then, karma hit. On the way, we got a call. June had been in a car accident. Apparently, she grabbed the steering wheel of the taxi because she thought the driver was taking the wrong route. The car spun out and hit a tree. June walked away with scratches, but the poor driver took the full impact. Broken arm, deep head gash, hospitalized. He's suing her now, and my parents are panicking, trying to cover the damages with their savings. When they told me what happened, I snapped. The words just slipped out. That's karma for forcing me to give up Rome. They were horrified. Told me I was heartless, that words carry weight, and now they finally saw my true selfish nature. Hypocrisy much? They literally told me my trip would be wasted if I went, but apparently that wasn't cool. Furious, I grabbed a small bag, ordered a taxi, and headed to the hospital myself. I realized in that moment, no matter what I did, my family would never see me as worthy or equal, so why keep sacrificing for them? When I arrived, June was busy spinning her version of the accident to the cops, trying to claim it wasn't her fault. I didn't even bother arguing. I just walked up and asked her one thing. Do you still have my boarding pass? Update. My grandparents gave me a trip to Rome. My parents forced me to give it to my golden child's sister. She crashed on the way to the airport, and I ended up taking the ticket back and flying anyway. So, yeah, here's what happened next. When I confronted June at the hospital, she looked completely stunned and confused. I didn't even wait for her to respond. I grabbed her bag, dug through it, and found my boarding pass. Without another word, I bolted out, jumped into the taxi, and rushed straight to the airport. I barely made it in time, but somehow, against all odds, I ended up on the plane. And then it hit me. I was actually flying to Rome. I didn't check my phone until I landed. And wow, my family is furious. My parents think I'm a heartless monster because, in their words, I abandoned my sister after the accident. The accident she caused herself, might I add. June is pissed because she claims I stole her chance, when in reality, she stole mine first. All I did was take back what was mine to begin with. Apparently, the family consensus is that I was wrong and owe everyone an apology. June even texted me that her parents are draining their savings to pay off the taxi driver who's suing her for damages, and that I should be helpful by handing over the birthday check my grandparents gave me. According to her, I'm selfish for traveling while the family is suffering. But honestly, I don't think I owe anyone anything. To answer some of the questions people had, the boarding pass issue. I'm 99% sure my parents never actually figured out how to legally transfer the ticket. June probably just planned to show up and bluff her way through security. If they'd really switched the booking, I wouldn't have been able to board with my passport. So their plan was just smoke and mirrors, and it backfired. Why I still live at home? It's complicated. I grew up believing that if I just tried harder, my parents would eventually treat me like they treat June. I spent 18 years trying to earn their love, never realizing how toxic that mindset was. Moving in with my grandparents never seemed like an option. They lived far out of town, and honestly, I thought keeping the peace with my parents was my best shot. Spoiler, it wasn't. But now I'm realizing I don't have to live like this anymore. My relationship with June? We've never been close. I don't hate her, she doesn't hate me, we just don't get along. She's always been controlling, the kind of person who had to sit in the front seat, even on family trips. So of course, she tried to take the wheel from the taxi driver because she thought she knew the faster route. That's exactly the kind of thing she does. And yes, my parents aren't doing great financially. Mom's a nurse, dad's a high school football coach. They rely heavily on my grandparents' help. Now, with this lawsuit hanging over them, they're in real trouble. If they want financial help from my grandparents, they'll have to admit what actually happened, which I doubt they're eager to do.
Update number 1. I've had a couple of days to think it over, and honestly, I've decided not to waste this trip worrying about my parents or June. This is probably the last chance I'll get for years. Once I start college, I won't have this kind of freedom again. So, I'm going to enjoy Rome. My sister made her choices, my parents made theirs. For once in my life, I'm choosing me. Update number 2. My Rome trip changed everything. Now I live with my grandparents. They're adults, and they can deal with their own mess. It's not my fault they tried to take something that was never theirs to begin with and ended up facing the consequences. You guys were right. It was foolish of me to ever expect them to appreciate my sacrifice. They'll always resent me no matter what I do. So why should I keep giving up my happiness for them? Right now, I'm having the best time of my life in Rome. This morning, I finally opened up to my grandparents about everything. How my parents have treated me all these years, how they've always put June first, and how I was constantly overlooked. Even my closest friends never knew the full story. So telling my grandparents felt like a huge weight lifted off my chest. They were shocked that it had gone on for so long and that I kept quiet. I told them I always thought if I just stay quiet and keep trying to be the perfect daughter, eventually my parents will love me too. But now I finally understand. That day will never come. My grandparents told me I did the right thing. They insisted that when I come back from Rome, I should go straight to their house instead of my parents'. They said they'll make all the arrangements for me to move in with them. When I reminded them that I'll be starting college in the fall, they smiled and said that's not a problem. They'll cover all my expenses themselves. That one conversation literally changed my life. For the first time, I know where I'll belong when I return. My parents are furious, of course. They never planned to pay for my college anyway. They had told me from the start that since they already paid for June's education, I was on my own. But now it doesn't matter. I'll be okay. Update number 3. My trip ended a few days ago, and I'm officially living with my grandparents. When I got back, I went straight to their house, and to my surprise, they had already prepared a guest room for me and even hired movers to bring all my things from my parents' place. They welcomed me so warmly, I almost cried. They told me what happened after our phone call. Apparently, the night of June's accident, my parents had called my grandparents asking for help. They didn't want to dip into their own savings or risk a lawsuit, especially since the dashcam footage clearly showed June was at fault. The only way out was a settlement, but the taxi driver was asking for a huge sum. When they all met, my grandparents first asked my parents about me, whether it was true they had always treated me unfairly and even forced me to give up my Rome trip. My parents tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't the time to discuss me since I was off partying in Rome. But my grandparents pressed, and eventually my parents snapped and admitted everything. They said yes, it was true, but claimed I deserved it because I abandoned the family when things got hard. They accused me of showing up at the hospital only to snatch the boarding pass, not caring about June. They even said I'd always been jealous because June was better at everything. Then they called me spoiled and selfish and told my grandparents that when I returned, they wouldn't tolerate me anymore. That was the final straw. My grandparents cut ties with them on the spot. My parents told them if they wanted to take me in, then fine, because they were done with me anyway. Hearing all this broke my heart. Deep down, I always knew my parents didn't care about me, but having them outright say it, that hurt more than I can describe. I cried so much that night. But through it all, my grandparents stood by me. They've shown me what family is supposed to feel like. For the first time in my life, I finally feel safe. This is my home now until I leave for college in a couple of months. And honestly, I couldn't be more grateful. Update number 4. My grandparents completely changed my life, and my parents got a reality check. When I leave for college, I won't have to worry about a thing. My grandparents are covering all my expenses. Since returning, I haven't spoken to my parents or June at all. I didn't even read their last messages because I wanted to just enjoy my trip. June's messages were all the same, calling me selfish, spoiled, worthless, and saying she's glad she doesn't have to deal with me anymore because I'm unworthy of her company. Honestly, I think she got it backwards. She's the one unworthy of mine. But I really don't care. The words that hurt most come from my parents, though even their words no longer surprise me.
They sent messages accusing me of being heartless, saying they should have stopped me at the hospital, claiming it was their fault for not raising me properly, and pointing out that even at the hospital, I escaped to go on the trip. They kept repeating things like, "We did everything to give you a comfortable life." Comfortable life doesn't equal good childhood, I thought. Sure, they fed me, clothed me, and put a roof over my head, but that doesn't erase years of neglect, favoritism, and emotional harm. They said I complained out of jealousy of June, and therefore calling them villains was unfair. Then they concluded by calling me a void, saying I wasted their time and energy, and now they're finally happy without me. It stung, and I nearly cried. But after talking with my grandparents, I promised myself I would no longer let their cruel words break me. I blocked my parents, cutting off all contact. I need to start healing and maybe erase their toxic influence from my mind. I don't know if I can do it completely, but I will try. The funniest, most insane part happened today. It's been almost 2 weeks since I returned from Rome. I had no clue what was going on with my parents or June. I assumed they were still scrambling money for the taxi settlement. But today, out of nowhere, my parents showed up at my grandparents' house, clearly ready for revenge. Thankfully, they didn't even acknowledge me. They went straight to the living room where my grandparents were. I froze, unsure what to do, but my grandparents told me to sit with them. They could see the looks on my parents' faces, annoyance, anger, but nothing was said out loud. When my grandparents asked why they had come, the parents said they still expected compensation for all the money they supposedly spent on me over the years. They pulled out documents claiming I owed them almost $120,000 for raising me. I was floored. The audacity. These were the people who had done the bare minimum, and now they were trying to profit off of it?
My grandparents calmly asked to speak privately, leaving me out. After a few tense minutes, they came back and said they were willing to pay, but only if my parents returned all the money they had borrowed from my grandparents over the years. That was it. My parents were completely blindsided, and I couldn't stop laughing. Eventually, they shouted, slammed the door, and left. I don't think they'll be back anytime soon, and honestly, it doesn't matter. My grandparents have proven they can handle them, and my father being their only son doesn't change anything. I leave for college in a few months, and for the first time in my life, I'm genuinely excited. Looking back, going to Rome was probably the best decision I've ever made. It not only gave me an amazing trip, but also helped me finally claim my life and freedom.
Almost 7 years ago, my family cut me off completely and threw me out of the house. At the time, I was only 22, still working my first job, not financially stable enough to rent on my own. It all happened so suddenly that I had no time to prepare, emotionally or financially. The reason for all of it was my sister, Hannah. Hannah and I were never especially close. She was quite a bit older than me. By the time she was 27, she married her boyfriend, Pete. They stayed married for about 3 years before she filed for divorce, claiming Pete had been cheating on her with one of my friends. Back then, I was still living with my parents after college, saving money before moving out. Everything at home was fine until Hannah came back one night in tears, declaring she'd discovered Pete's betrayal. According to her, he had been having an affair for 6 months. Somehow, it was my fault. The reason? I had introduced Pete to my friend Emily. She had been struggling to gain weight, and since Pete was a certified nutritionist, he offered to help her out. That was it. Hannah twisted that into a story that Emily was the woman Pete cheated with. I was stunned. Emily and I weren't super close, but I knew her well enough to believe she would never get involved with a married man. And Pete, if anything, he always seemed hopelessly devoted to Hannah. He talked about her constantly, and not once in those 3 years did I see anything suspicious. But none of my doubts mattered. My parents instantly sided with Hannah. They didn't ask for evidence, didn't question anything. They just took her word for it. I can't blame them for choosing their daughter over their son-in-law, but what broke me was how quickly they turned on me. Hannah stormed into the house one day, hysterical, and convinced them that I was to blame for ruining her marriage, simply because I had introduced Pete to Emily. Within minutes, they told me to pack my things and leave. When I begged them to listen, they said if I didn't go on my own, they'd throw me out. Just like that, I lost my home and my family in the same day. I still remember sitting on the curb outside with my bags, crying for an hour before finally calling a friend to let me crash at his place. I tried reaching out to my parents in the days that followed. Calls, texts, visits, nothing worked. They blocked my number. The one time I went to the house, my mom threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. That's when it hit me. They truly believed I was responsible. Looking back, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Hannah was always the favorite. I was the unexpected second child, the one who got leftovers while she got the spotlight. As kids, it didn't matter much to me, but I never thought that favoritism would destroy my place in the family entirely. Pete blocked me too. No explanation, no chance to defend myself. And Hannah moved back in with my parents, making it impossible for me to even try talking things out. The only person left who might know the truth was Emily. We weren't close, but I reached out anyway. And when I explained what Hannah had accused me of, she was horrified. She swore nothing ever happened between her and Pete, that their interactions had been strictly professional. To prove it, she even told me about her long-term boyfriend. They were already talking about marriage. She showed me photos of the two of them together. Her explanation made infinitely more sense than anything Hannah had said. Deep down, I already knew Hannah had lied, probably to cover the real reason for the divorce. But without any proof, I was powerless. My family had made up their minds, and I was left alone. Back then, all I wanted was to reconnect with my family. Despite everything they had done to me, I still missed them terribly. But as time passed, I had no choice but to adapt. I found an apartment, poured myself into work, and tried to build a life. Bills had to be paid, and keeping myself busy was the only way I knew how to cope. It wasn't easy. The pain was overwhelming. But slowly, I taught myself to move forward, with or without their support. Years went by, and life began to change for the better. I moved out of that tiny apartment into something much nicer, built a stable career, and just last week, I proposed to the woman I've been dating for 2 years. She said yes. But the real turning point came shortly after my engagement. A few days after my fiancée, Lisa, posted our engagement photos on Instagram and cross-shared them to Facebook, I got an email. Not just any email, but the email that finally explained everything that had happened years ago, complete with proof. It turned out that Lisa, who works as a doctor, had once met Pete, my former brother-in-law, at a medical seminar. They had stayed loosely connected on Facebook. That's how he stumbled across our engagement post. For the first time in years, I was glad the world was so small. Instead of messaging me directly, Pete chose to send an anonymous email. Later, he explained it was because he didn't want to seem awkward. After all, years had passed since the divorce, and he had no desire to look like someone still clinging to the past. He also admitted that since he'd blocked me back then, it felt strange to just pop back up in my life. But what mattered was the content. The email laid out the full truth behind the divorce, and it completely shattered the story Hannah had built. It was Hannah who had been unfaithful, not Pete. And worse, she had cheated with my friend Frank. At the time, Frank worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. Never in a million years would I have suspected anything between them. They'd been so careful to hide it. But Pete eventually found out. When confronted, Hannah tried to twist the situation, telling Pete that it was my fault. She claimed I had introduced her to Frank, even encouraging their connection by mentioning his interest in music since she was a decent singer herself. From there, she said, things just happened. To cover her tracks, she even insisted I had helped them hide the affair all along, which was, of course, a blatant lie. Pete admitted he was furious when he found out. Instead of thinking clearly, he blocked everyone in my family, including me. Looking back, he knows it was the wrong move, but at the time, anger clouded everything.
The email itself included screenshots of conversations between Hannah and Frank. Messages where they openly confessed their love, joked about how easy it was to fool Pete, and arranged secret meetups. Hannah had even signed off using her rarely mentioned middle name, something only a few people knew. There was no denying it. Reading those messages was surreal. For the first time in years, I had undeniable proof. Hannah had lied about everything. I eventually confronted Pete in person after realizing he was in Lisa's Facebook friends list. He admitted that Emily, my friend who had originally been accused, had told him her side years ago. He just never told me because he didn't want to stir things up again. He regretted it now, because if he had spoken up earlier, I could have cleared my name long ago. Still, he was willing to help me now. Pete and I agreed that Hannah's lies had destroyed enough lives, and neither of us wanted her manipulations to stand unchallenged any longer. The truth was clear. Hannah had weaponized her family's trust to protect herself, even if it meant sacrificing me. She dragged my name through the mud, convinced my parents to disown me, all to keep her own reputation intact while she pursued her affair. And for the first time in years, I had the evidence to finally set the record straight. I'm certain my sister never once tried to tell our parents the truth. Instead, she kept feeding them lies during the divorce, and they swallowed every word without hesitation. She knew that if our parents ever discovered she was the one who cheated, she'd be in serious trouble, and she just couldn't allow that. Well, now the truth is finally out, and I'm going to use it to destroy her life the same way she destroyed mine all those years ago.
I wasn't sure if my parents were still living in the same house since I hadn't seen them in 7 years, but an old neighbor confirmed they never moved. Even better, Hannah still lived there. That didn't surprise me at all. She was always lazy and hated responsibility. Living off aging parents while they did everything for her was exactly her style. 2 days ago, Pete and I showed up unannounced. My mom opened the door, and we pushed our way inside before she could react. My dad and Hannah were sitting in the living room. The happy family reunited, but only for a moment. Their faces twisted as soon as they saw us. My dad immediately started shouting, threatening to call the police if we didn't leave. I told him he could do whatever he wanted, but only after reading the documents we brought. My parents looked confused, while Hannah turned pale and bolted to her room. I figured she was trying to avoid the inevitable, but there was no escaping it. Pete pulled out the divorce papers and screenshots of Hannah's messages with Frank, while I explained the real story. Pete also revealed how Hannah had been forced to give up our grandmother's diamond heirloom ring to settle the divorce, since her teacher salary couldn't cover the payout. My parents were stunned. We sat there watching as the drama unfolded. My dad demanded answers from Hannah, but when she tried lying yet again, even with the evidence right in front of her, he'd had enough. He packed her belongings, shoved them into a bag, and kicked her out of the house on the spot. I didn't need to be told twice. Pete and I walked out together, leaving Hannah begging our parents to let her back in, exactly the way I had once begged them years ago. It was the sweetest revenge. I felt nothing but satisfaction. A couple days later, Hannah showed up at my place, demanding I fix things with our parents. I don't even know how she found my address, but I told her point blank that I owed her nothing. She ruined my life, and I simply returned the favor. We were even now. Apparently, she has no pride left, because the moment I said that, she broke down sobbing, calling me a monster. I honestly didn't care. I put on my headphones, turned up the music, and let Lisa keep working peacefully in her office. Eventually, she left, but not before scrawling a message on my door with a marker reminding me that I'm a vengeful monster. To be honest, I don't feel bad about what I did. I don't think I'm the villain here. I didn't lie or scheme like she did. I just exposed the truth. So, am I really the bad guy for ruining my sister's life and getting her kicked out of our parents' home 7 years after she blamed me for her divorce? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Update 1. Hannah didn't stop bothering me. Even after a week, she kept calling non-stop, 14 times in a day. I finally threatened to involve the police, and that made her back off, at least for now. I have no idea how she keeps getting my number after I block her, but apparently she has her friends add me into group calls from different numbers. She's tried guilt-tripping me, saying her teacher salary isn't enough to live on. But I know that's not the real issue. What she really hates is finally having to pay rent, utilities, and groceries herself. And honestly, that's not my problem. As for my parents, they're not much better. They found me on Facebook after seeing Lisa's engagement post. Now they're suddenly interested in being part of my life again. They even hinted that they expect to be invited to my wedding. They still haven't apologized, but somehow think they deserve to show up on one of the most important days of my life. Lisa and I laughed reading their messages because they were so delusional it almost seemed like a bad joke. But in truth, the whole thing is more sad than funny.
Update 2. Hannah showed up at my house again, even after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was getting ready to leave for work, but she stopped me by flopping onto the hood of my car, refusing to move until I spoke with her. It was incredibly annoying, and this time I actually called the police. They took her away while she screamed and cried, trying to paint me as the bad guy. Unfortunately for her, nobody bought it. It took some time to file the official report against her, but as soon as I did, I rushed to work so this incident wouldn't ruin my day. I figured my parents would bail her out since she's their favorite, and I was right. They sent her home and then followed up with a long message telling me I had been too harsh and unfair to them over a mistake they supposedly made almost 10 years ago. It was laughable. Nothing my sister and parents did to me back then could ever be called merciful or fair. No mercy stopped them from literally throwing me out of the house with nowhere to go. So now, I see no reason to offer forgiveness or kindness. I messaged my parents saying that after all these years, they had lost any right to tell me what I can or cannot do, and that they should stop deluding themselves. I haven't blocked them yet. Had to check the message first, but I will soon. Hopefully then, I can finally cut that whole family out of my life for good. Update 3. I just got home from work, checked my socials, and saw that my parents sent me another long message. Lisa and I read it together, and I swear it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. These poor people don't realize that nothing they say or do now can hurt me. I just laughed at how pathetic they are. They still think we're a family, and announced they'd taken Hannah back, claiming both of their children deserve a second chance, as if I was ever in the wrong. They expected Lisa and me to visit them for dinner before my wedding to civilly resolve our differences. Too bold of them to assume I'd ever want them anywhere near my wedding. We laughed at their absurd message, and I responded that I had zero interest in any invitations from them. I'm perfectly happy living my life without them, just like I have for the last 7 years. They made it clear long ago that I'm better off without them. I'm grateful it took me so long to realize that. I no longer need them or their so-called forgiveness. They can continue playing happy family with Hannah all they want. I don't care. After sending that last message, I blocked them permanently. That's it. I'm done. I'm sure they'll try to contact me again somehow, but it doesn't matter. Lisa is the only family I need, and I'm happier than I've ever been with just her. My parents and sister never could see past their own noses, and I doubt they ever will. Next time they try to reach out, they'll be talking to my lawyer.